Are we ready to go?
And we are now ready to.
Good evening. Welcome everyone to our June board meeting. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Leah Cruzy, board chair. Joining me this evening are my fellow board members and colleagues, Vice Chair Jim Sandman, Nick Rodriguez, and Shakora Adama-Fanian. Our board secretary, Ricardo Ganjam, and treasurer Chantel Wright are absent this evening. Ms. Ganjam will be participating via proxy vote on all action items for this evening's meeting. The DC PCSB has been busy looking ahead to chart a path out of the pandemic for students to be on their own paths to lifelong learning, fulfilling careers, and economic security. For some, adulthood is here already. For some, it's several years away. Parents, we know it'll all go too quickly. And for some, it's happening right now. One of the best things we get to do as members of this body is attend the many and varied graduations of students across the city. And I get to sign the diplomas of those inspiring young people and adults together with their loved ones as they celebrate this milestone and look forward to their next chapters. Some on to post-secondary education, some into the workforce, and some into service. And I'm also looking forward to the public conversation that the board will have on Wednesday evening regarding the components and mechanics of the revised accountability framework. This virtual conversation will take place from 4 to 6 p.m. this Wednesday, and the public is invited as observers. Please check the DC PCSB website for information on how to join the Zoom of this board discussion. And now I'd like to turn it over to our Executive Director, Dr. Michelle Walker-Davis.
Thank you, Chair Cruzy. Like you, I have been inspired by the graduations I've attended. They are a wonderful family and community celebration that really shows the dedication of our school leaders and teachers to prepare our future leaders. It's actually hard to believe that we're at the end of another school year, and I am proud of the school leaders, their teachers and staff, our students, and their families. This is our first full school year post-pandemic, and we have learned many things during this time. And one of them is on our agenda tonight. One of our LEAs has a proposal to operate virtual Fridays, an idea tried out and developed during the pandemic that it now wants to make permanent. We do have a busy meeting tonight, but I do want to highlight two additional agenda items that we will be discussing. The first is related to our work to develop a new charter goals policy, which will determine the pathways on how charter LEAs will meet their academic achievement goals as we emerge from the pandemic. This policy is an important bridge between where we are now to where we will be once the revised accountability framework is approved and implemented. But we are not asking the board to vote on the actual policy tonight. Rather, we are asking the board to temporarily extend the current charter goals policy, which is the COVID-19 impact policy, set to expire on June 30th. We're asking the board to extend that until August 31st so that we can have more time to review the public comments we've already received for the new charter goals policy and to thoughtfully include that in a draft that will come to you next month. We want to ensure that we have something in place and not have a lapse in the overall guidance for our schools. Second concerns KIPP DC, Public Charter School, and its discovery that it had been defrauded by a former high-level employee. Staff will share some on each of these items later in the agenda. And so at this point, Chair Cruzy, I'd like to turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Walker-Davis. We will next move on to the public comment portion of our agenda. And as we move through each agenda item, Aisha and Courtney, our moderators for the evening, will unmute DC PCSB constituents, staff, or individuals speaking on behalf of a school. The hand-raising feature has been disabled. Individuals who have previously signed up to testify will be called upon. As a reminder, all written public comment is available to the public on our website. If you didn't sign up by sending your name to the public comment mailbox before this meeting, please submit your comments to public.comment@dcpcsb.org or call our public comment line to leave a voicemail testimony at 202-328-2660 and select option 2. Now let's hear from the 7 witnesses who have signed up to speak this evening. I'd like to begin by inviting David Alpert to testify, David, when you get up here, please keep your comments to 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, members of the board. My name is David Alpert. I'm the Ward 2 representative on the working group for the city's student assignment study, an officer in the Ward 2 Education Council, parent of 2 DCPS elementary school students, and I write the DC Schools Analysis newsletter at dcschools.info. I'm not here to support nor oppose any particular agenda item, but rather I'm speaking to you because I hope to collaborate with you going forward on a vision for a holistic school system that best meets our children's needs, regardless of sector, building on the value of great charters and neighborhood schools. I hope we can figure out, how do we grow effective schools in an environment of flat population of children rather than a growing one? How do we add predictable pathways, regardless of sector, and where parents don't need to strategically plan for high school when children are just 2 or 3 years old? How do we ensure citywide schools are effectively serving a cross-section of the citywide population? With regard to the Yu Ying item, I'm enthusiastic about our language education programs. I'd hope to see more in the staff report about the topics you raised last month, like how can the equity criterion have teeth? What can be done to ensure that at-risk students don't perform worse than citywide beyond just vaguely adding an extra class? Can we have a plan for future feeder pathways beyond the hope that something gets worked out in 6 years? Can we ensure schools, charter and also DCPS, have a clearer understanding of their transportation issues before buying sites for new schools? Also, regarding the Apple Tree agenda item, this school has provided valuable services across our city. But is it the best use of taxpayer dollars to make PK free for more of those who can already afford private school in the wealthiest neighborhoods? In this particular case, how can we ensure seats go to those in the community who can least afford an alternative? I look forward to collaborating with you and others on these and other issues going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alford. I will next welcome up Patricia Kreider.
I am pulling her up now. Ms. Kreider, you have to accept the invitation to be promoted. I see you in the queue. You have to accept it. There you go.
Welcome. I think you're on mute, Ms. Kreider.
Oh, I'm sorry. Good evening, members and staff. My name is Patricia Kreider, and I'm the proud mother of Friendship alumni, Charmaine Carter. And I'm here to testify in support of Friendship's 25-year review. It was almost 25 years ago when I first heard about Friendship. I was sitting in church when a nice lady came to talk about the new school, Collegiate Academy. They promised great teachers, a quality education, and new computers for their students. We couldn't afford a computer at that time. So my daughter was struggling in school, and I was happy with the school that I wasn't happy with the school that she was in. As a 9th grader, they accidentally registered her for 11th grade classes. When they realized their mistake, they moved her back, and she became despondent. She wasn't being challenged. That changed when she arrived at Friendship. The teachers were more engaging, they had good curriculum, and it was exciting for her. Charmaine has always been a people person, and she really took to her new environment. So one of her teachers at Friendship, Ms. Adair, saw something special in her, and she really brought out that gift in Charmaine, the love for writing and spoken word. Ms. Adair related to the kids and encouraged them. She saw the best in them. She saw their potential, and she made them feel special. She understood the inner city kids, where they were coming from, and understood that many of them came from troubled homes. She gave students a way to challenge the problems of the inner city kids. And I think it was a healing for them. Friendship was filled with people who could relate to the problems of inner city kids and what they were going through. Friendship has a lot of Black inner city kids, and they always set a high expectation for what is possible for them. Friendship hires great people and trusts them to do great work. They make sure that the children get the education they deserve. It's like a family, you know? If she hadn't gone to Friendship, I think my daughter would have been different. Friendship has brought her out of her shell, gave her confidence and a belief in herself that she carries to this day. Charmaine was actually the first valedictorian at Friendship Collegiate. They set a high standard for her, and she met it. She met their expectations. That wasn't happening where she was at before. So I appreciate everything that Friendship had did for my family and for my daughter, and I support them unconditionally, and I hope you would too. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kreider. Next, Candace Smith-Bassey. Aisha, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. The next person I see in the queue from your list is Jendai Wright, and I just need Ms. Wright to also accept the promotion. When she sees it, just accept the promotion and we can listen to your comment. Okay, she's coming on.
Thank you.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hello. Thank you, PCS board and staff, for giving me a chance to speak tonight. My name is Jendai Wright. I'm a Friendship Collegiate alumni, class of 2006, a teacher at Friendship Low Pierce, and the mom of 3 students who attend Friendship Woodridge. Friendship is like home, especially for me. I started in high school at Friendship after I was put out of another school. The teachers at Friendship wrapped their arms around me and really made me feel like I belong, like I had value. It still does that, even as a teacher. It allows me to grow professionally. I started as a dedicated aide, then moved to a para, and now a teacher. Friendship has really touched all parts of my life. Ms. Harris, who was my music teacher, even sung at my wedding. She still teaches at Friendship. Friendship does the same thing for my children. They love them, they know them, they challenge them. It's family. For my children, they've made them amazing students. My son started in pre-K 3 and is in 3rd now. He's been the finalist for the spelling bee. He's thriving and excelling. He's a Black boy who is doing amazing things. He's learning so much and doing so well at school, and that is due to his teachers, and I am so proud and grateful for them. Now, to my twin daughters. Their teachers have done the same thing for them. They are helping and building my children with a strong foundation. Character is important to me, and I want my children to be able to get along with people and have relationships with people. I want them to be independent and self-sustaining, to not be confined or boxed in by expectations, to have the courage to blaze their own path. Friendship is helping my babies to build their character and to develop confidence. In high school, Friendship did the same for me. I remember how important it was to go to college. I love the excitement around acceptance letters, those posters on the board celebrating students who committed to one college or another. Friendship set me on the path to college, and I attended and graduated Fayetteville State University. Friendship helped to put me on the path to the life I have now, and now they are doing the same for my children. Birthdays and anniversaries are a time we all measure of our lives, what we have accomplished, what has been our impact on the world. This 25-year review is an anniversary of sorts. I am testifying today as the embodiment of the impact that Friendship has had in my life and in the community for the last 25 years, as an alum, as an educator, and as a parent. There are thousands out there just like me who are thriving because of friendship, and there are thousands more to come. Thank you for letting me speak tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Wright. Aisha, do any of our previous
I have available Marquita Hardy and Amy.
okay, then we'll proceed.
Mhm.
Welcome, Marquita.
Hello. Okay, so good evening, esteemed members of the Public Charter School Board. My name is Marquita Hardy, and I'm also happy to be here as an alumna of Friendship Public Charter School. As Friendship celebrates its 25 years, I appreciate the opportunity to share my experiences as well and to advocate for an organization that has been instrumental in my success. So I actually attended Friendship Collegiate Academy for grades 10 through 12, and I graduated salutatorian as a part of the amazing class of 2007. Prior to Friendship, I attended a number of DCPS schools. And when I was deciding where I would go to high school, my mother heard about Friendship PCS. She was so on the mission and the culture. After one conversation with Dr. Scherze, she was very impressed by the rigorous academic offerings, such as the early college program, as well as the advanced placement courses. After graduating from Friendship, I attended Spelman College and I majored in English studies. I also had the honor of being a Gates Millennium Scholar, and I was the first student at Friendship and in DC to receive this esteemed scholarship. After Spelman, I became a Teach for America Corps member in New Jersey, and during this time, I received my master's in urban education at the University of Pennsylvania. After serving as a classroom educator, I transitioned into management roles for a higher education technology company, but my passion has always been K-12. So I came back to Friendship in a teaching capacity, and I taught special education for 3 years. I now have the pleasure of working at DC's Office of the State Superintendent for Education as a program manager on the college and career readiness team. So I have the pleasure of supporting state level programming and initiatives to prepare students for their lives post-graduation. My journey has taken different paths, but children and education have and will always be at the core of why I continue to do this work. I hope that this network is around forever because it needs to be. Friendship set the tone for educational excellence in Washington, D.C., not just for me, but for so many of my peers who not only went off to college, but are also shining stars in fields such as medicine, law, entrepreneurship, and education. Friendship is a pipeline to success for students in Washington, D.C., and I urge you to continue to support its ever-evolving growth and success. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak on Friendship's behalf. And again, I just want to thank you for the chance to talk about the tremendous impact that Friendship has had on my life and how I'm honored to be a part of its legacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Marquita, and thank you
You're
so much
welcome.
for your story. Next, we have Amy.
Just talking
You're
to nobody. I'm asking this body to provide additional accountability and oversight for the leadership of Mundo Verde Public Charter School on behalf of its caregivers. We want to build a better working relationship with Mundo Verde, and we need a more equitable stake in the governance of our school. Some of you may have seen Mundo Verde in the news the week before last. Third grade parents staged 2 days of protest outside of the school due to lack of responsiveness from the administration about a wide variety of problems throughout this and last school year. We were pleased that several board members granted us a listening session last week and have agreed in principle to one of our requests, but we're saddened that it took such drastic steps to get a response of any kind after months and months of attempts. We're also concerned that, as happened last year, none of the promises from the board or school leadership for the coming school year will receive action of any kind in the coming school year. This is part of a long pattern of Mundo Verde leadership lying to or outright ignoring parents and caregivers, administration misleading board members on events, and failing to implement or even consider many times any of our reasonable requests. This pattern stretches back years. Your colleague, Teresa Kemp, now has a robust file of complaints from families. One point that I think illustrates this dynamic well, after this listening session last week, where parents were sometimes in tears, recounting, for instance, how little their kids have learned over the last 3 years, unsupervised students during park testing, numerous acts of violence, sexual harassment and assault of elementary aged kids. After hearing all of that, our executive director sat down with our teachers the following day and spoke disdainfully and sarcastically about us and our concerns. We really need this body's help. If you'd like more detail on any of this, I'd be happy to provide you with ample documentation of these ongoing and historical issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Townsend.
Candace Smith is also in the queue.
Great. Welcome, Candace.
Hear me? Good evening, board members and staff. My name is Candace Smith Bassey. My two boys, Victor and Chancellor, attend Friendship Online. They're in the 5th and 3rd grade. I'll do my best to stay within the time you have given me, but you should know that I have a lot to say about friendship. I tell everyone about my experience. I stop people on the street. I talk to my Uber drivers. I recruit my neighbors. The last 3 years at Friendship Online have exceeded all my expectations. My children are both beautiful and brilliant. I found Friendship Online before the pandemic. I had concerns with my child's school. I was an involved parent and I didn't like what I was seeing. I talked to another parent about Friendship Online and I felt like it was right for our family. I can't say enough great things about friendship. My children are happy and I am happy. Right away, they made sure we got all of the equipment that we needed to get started. Even more importantly, Victor got to keep all of his special education services. He's actually getting more services at Friendship Online than he was at his last school. Victor has a general education teacher and a special education teacher. He has occupational therapy. He has speech. He also has ABA therapy. And he's doing really great. We have IEP meetings whenever they're needed. The school is always available for me whenever I need something, and he is really thriving. Friendship helps me to know how my children are doing. I joke that MAP testing is my best friend. It gives me a chance to know that I'm doing a good job as a parent in supporting my children's education and that the school is doing a good job of providing an education for them. Another thing I like about Friendship is that they give parents so much help. At every step, they support you through the process. They help parents plan for self-care. We've worked with art therapy. We've even had like actual chair exercise where we can actually work, which is a great way to let out a lot of feelings that you may not be able to. I also love how we do in-person meetups. We have field events and field days and a lot of meet and greets so that the children can get time to spend with one another. And they also have access to art, music, Spanish, and other classes that interest them. Now that my children are taking Spanish class, you cannot take the smiles off their faces. Ultimately, the most important thing for my children is that they grow up to be great people. I need them to have great morals, to be smart and aware. I want them to know history and how things are formed. They don't have to be the smartest people in the world, but I want them to be smart. And with friendship, I think that they might just end up being the smartest people in the world. So thank you for giving me the chance to talk about my experience.
Thank you, Candace. How's this area?
Don't see Miss Cunningham in the queue.
I'm sorry, you don't see that person?
I do not see that person in the queue.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you to all our public comment speakers this evening. Next on our agenda is a charter amendment request. For that, I yield the floor to Tricia Francisco, our Equity and Access Specialist, to introduce the request from Paul Public Charter School. And I'd also like to invite representatives from the school to provide remarks regarding this amendment request. That's Dr. Tracy Wright, Charlotte Spann, and Rosemary Reagan.
Hi, I'm Tricia Francisco, a specialist in the School Performance Department. Tonight, the board will hear from Paul Public Charter School regarding its request to offer a distance learning program on a routine basis starting in school year 2023 to 2024. Previously, in June 2022, Paul Public Charter School sought approval to offer a distance learning program known as Virtual Fridays. Under the program, students and teachers will engage in virtual instruction on Fridays. Students may participate in virtual instruction from their homes or the school building. During the July 2022 board meeting, DC PCSB approved the school to pilot the Virtual Fridays program for 1 year. At that time, DC PCSB issued the following invitation. Following a successful pilot, the school may submit an addendum to its June 2022 charter agreement application seeking authorization to permanently offer virtual programming. The school piloted the Virtual Fridays program in school year 2022 to 2023 and submitted an addendum to its June 2022 application. Representatives from the school are available to answer the board's questions. Dr. White, is Ms. Rosemary joining us?
She is not.
Okay.
I'm sorry, it's just Ms. Spann and myself. Good evening, board members.
Good evening. It's nice to see you, Tracy.
And good evening, staff members. Good evening, Dr. Davis.
Good evening, Dr. White.
All right, questions? Or do you want me to start with a quick overview about how it went? Okay, let's start there. So good evening, everyone. Happy June, especially happy June because it is the end of the school year and we're eagerly anticipating a wonderful summer filled with planning and preparing for the next school year. As Tricia read, and you all may remember, we came to the board last year asking for the opportunity to amend our charter so that we could offer our half day of programming in the virtual space. You know, this was for a myriad of reasons, but one of the main reasons is because, as you know, we're kind of transitioning back from the pandemic. There are many things that have changed as it relates to being, you know, making sure that our students are college and career ready in this world. What that means now post-pandemic is very different and changed from what it meant pre-pandemic. Let me give you a statistic that's a bit startling. As of 2021, 75% of all college students in the United States of America take at least one course online. I'm going to say that again. As of 2021, 75% of all college students in the United States of America take at least one college course online. What that means is that if we are not rightly preparing our students, not just to handle the rigor of college work, but also teaching them how to learn in the virtual space, then we are truly not making sure that they are college and or career ready. And so to that end, having to deal with what it meant to truly make sure that students were college and career ready going into this version of our world and society, coupled with needing to do something more and different as it related to addressing learning loss. We made the decision that given the very good success that we had with our students during the pandemic, and some of that success was seen actually in I was going to say DC Cast. That tells you how long I've been in the city. Our scores, in particular for our middle schoolers, we know that there are methods that we could use with our students to help them to be very successful in terms of learning academically, using the flexibility of the virtual space to provide very unique and customized learning experiences that got at that chipped away at both the learning loss and the persisting achievement gap. So to that end, we set out on a year of pilot and exploration. And I remember, I think it was Chair Member Sandman who said, it's, this is something that we need to grapple with. I believe that you said that when we were together this time last year. And it is, and I think board member Nick Rodriguez said it as well, that we have to grapple with this. We have to figure this out. And I just want to open by saying it was hard. It was very hard. I think when people hear about virtual work or virtual learning opportunities, that the mind immediately goes to, oh, well, that's a perk. And it is a perk of sorts, but I just want to say, make no mistakes about it. It was very difficult and it was complex, but it paid off. We brought to the PCSB staff our MAP results, and they were pretty compelling in terms of seeing the level of growth amongst our students. In particular, what I want to call out is not just the rate at which we saw growth across our organization, because we saw tremendous growth. But what I want to call out is that not only did we see tremendous growth, but we saw growth for some of our grade levels that was in the 99th percentile. And that's not reflected on the data that went to the PCSB. We'll send those updated reports. We've had an opportunity to talk with representatives from MAP. And in 5 of the areas where our students tested, we saw growth above the 80th percentile for full-blown grade levels, which means that unlike student growth metrics that looks at the individual growth of students, and that's typically higher than those school conditional growth metrics, our school conditional growth metrics were very, very high, which meant that we were moving whole grade levels of kids. Not that they were moving one whole grade level, some of them moved more than one grade level, right? But that we were moving by and large whole grade levels. Do we believe that the virtual Fridays had something to do with that? Of course it did. Is that the only thing? It is not. And I need to say that because virtual Fridays is one small part of a much larger involved strategy to address the needs of our students. And I'm happy to say that we saw that our students did continue to learn and that they did continue to grow at a rate that was actually faster than last year. The last 2 pieces that I'll say are that it's not just in the formal space that we tested with MAP, but we also saw and we're able to create a space where we were able to support our students who were dually enrolled at a level that we've never been able to support them before. As you can imagine, grappling with the demands of being in high school while grappling with the demands of actually taking on college coursework. This year, we had the highest number of students in our organization. It was well over, I believe, 60 students for a high school of roughly 400 children who were dually enrolled in some version of either an OSSI program or the new ATC program that we had this year. And we had tremendous success levels with those students because we were able to support them in a way that we had not been able to support them previously because one, we didn't have the staff available, nor did we have the flexibility in terms of time and space. The beautiful thing about being in a virtual space is that you can shift rooms and spaces like that. There's no 10-minute transition. There's no, I need to find a space available. It provides a flexibility that you don't necessarily have in person. And the last thing that I'll say is that it really, really significantly improved wellness in our organization. We have had the highest level of staff retention that we've had in years. Even though, we're in this place of negotiating salaries and money with the WTU, the mayor's budget and all that other kind of stuff, we still gave our offer letters out on schedule, not knowing kind of those unknown things, and had higher percentages of our staff to return them than we've ever had, faster than they ever had. Over 86% of our staff that is from the classroom plans to return, 91% of our network staff plans to return. We had very little turnover during the year. The year prior to that, that was a huge issue, not just in our school, but across the city. This year, we did not experience that. And then the last thing that I'll say is that in terms of wellness, we saw the number of incidences, amongst our students drop significantly. And so we do, again, it was one part of a comprehensive strategy, but it was an important part nonetheless. And so with that, open for any questions that you may have.
Dr. Wright, I want to begin by thanking you for this and congratulating you. This presentation from was it a year ago?
Mhm.
It feels very present. So I'd love to run a whole bunch of questions by, but I want to keep interest of time and appreciate the thorough recap here, especially the updated data as well that I know that staff will look forward to reviewing. I guess one question is, you mentioned it's complicated and it was hard. I remember you walking through with us kind of the deliberate process you had gone through very early on in the pandemic to prepare for those first few intense months, where there was a lot that was unexpected. In this case, you were able to anticipate, I think, some of it. Can you share with us, with whatever level of detail you feel like you can, of like what was complicated and what you learned from it, and should this body approve it going forward, based on feedback and what you've experienced, what you would want to do differently to improve upon it?
Yeah. So really quickly, what was complicated, I'll talk about a couple of the issues that were complicated relative to students, and then I'll punt to Ms. Spann to talk a little bit about the complexities of planning for the level of, I would say, customized instruction that happened on Fridays and how that was really a heavy lift for our teachers and staff. In addition to the regular coursework, they had to plan differently for Fridays. And so it added an added layer of work and responsibility. From a student side, in the pandemic, it was as if just something switched on with our students. And immediately, not immediately, but they very quickly acclimated to what it meant to learn in the virtual space. So they understood things like, you still have to have your uniform shirt on. You have to have your cameras on. Your face has to be in the center of the screen. If those things aren't happening, then you're actually not here. This is what it looks like to participate in discussions and conversations. Make sure you don't put that in the chat. We can all see it. Those types of standards and expectations that we were able to click into with our students pretty quickly, because that was how they learned 5 days a week. Because they were not learning that way 5 days a week, it was a lift to get them reacclimated to those expectations. And so we started every virtual Friday with a town hall. And so you would have folks taking pictures and, G-chatting kids on the side. And, again, it just was a lift to get them reacclimated to the expectations of what it meant to be connected in that space, because it wasn't happening every single day. It was only happening on Friday. So that was a challenge. And then the second piece is that, I think we shared with you all early on, if students did not acclimate as we expected them to, or if we saw that they weren't progressing the way we expected them to, then we brought them in. And so, having kids, say, what, you don't get advisory 2 in the virtual space, you have to come back into the building and work where, you have different levels of supervision. That's a challenge. I'll say that we didn't get a ton of pushback from parents or families when we had to do that. The kids didn't always love it, but they understood. And I would say in probably every case where we saw a child may have needed some additional supervision, bringing them to the building resolved that. I'll punt to Ms. Spann if you want to quickly talk about some of the challenges around planning for teachers.
Yeah. Good evening, board, Dr. Walker Davis and board staff. I'm Charlotte Spann, Executive Director of Schools at Paul. And I just want to begin by saying I am extremely proud of the work that the staff, the scholars, the parents have done this year to lift up Virtual Friday. And I'm extremely encouraged by some of the outcomes that we do attribute to the Virtual Friday being a part of our comprehensive menu. If I could just succinctly talk about some of the challenges and the lessons learned that have impacted some of our thinking for moving forward to future years. One was around, our first dimension was providing individualized support for scholars. And so this could have looked like support with the learning recovery platforms, in which we launched 2 new learning recovery platforms this year. It could have looked like supporting our scholars who are in AP courses with the more specialized support in addition to what's happening in their classroom during the week. It could have looked like our work on having park readiness groups based upon different levels that we started mid-year. And so because we were committed to being very data-based, evidence-based, and really leveraging Virtual Friday to complement what the data Monday through Thursday was telling us, it was a continuous week by week, month by month, looking at the data, what the learning recovery data was showing us, our formative assessment data was showing us to say, hey, is this group being effective for this group of scholars? What shifts do we need to make at the advisory? Now, we didn't make shifts week to week because that was just absolutely too much and that's not even sound. But we did pay attention to what the impact on that subset of scholars were based upon the group they were in. That took a lot of navigation. It took some very savvy data analysis in addition to our ongoing data analysis of the work from Monday through Thursday. And it took some foresight to thinking about what was on the horizon and what we were preparing each subgroup of scholars for, whether it was a grade level implication, whether our ninth graders were getting ready for DC science and things like that nature. It was hard work and exciting work because for me, a hidden agenda is always to get our organization and our staff stronger at data analysis. And so we could not get deeper into that. That's kind of a hidden agenda that, you know, we've talked to our staff about in reference to this use of formative assessment data and looking at what's happening in our learning recovery groups, our PARC groups, ID groups. That should inform what's going on through the week. Now, our lessons learned and reflections was around how can we increase connectivity to the learning of what's happening on Virtual Friday to Monday through Thursday? Because as Dr. White said, Virtual Friday is one component and strategy about overall organizational instructional priorities. And so the outstanding growth that we saw in MAP, we attribute in part to Virtual Friday, and we want to work on being more connected to the experience in Virtual Friday to Monday through Thursday. For example, one of the new learning recovery platforms we started this year was Achieve 3000, literacy and math for grades 5, we haven't gotten 5 yet, for grades 6 through 10 for math and grades 9 through 10 for ELA. And so we are really excited about that learning platform and Zern Math. And how do we make connections on Virtual Friday with our already existing small group instruction strategy that lives within our instructional core? And so over the past probably 4 months, we've done so, just like last spring when we were preparing for the launch, we've done so much refinement of how do we adjust the courses and the experience on Virtual Friday so we deepen the connectivity to the small group instruction that is already happening during the core week. And we're really excited about that. Literally, there's a work group that's meeting this week, next week, around Achieve 3000 literacy and how we take our learning from Virtual Friday and fold that into the small group instruction within our humanities core. So that's just one example of a challenge. I think another realistic example, and Dr. White hit on this from the standpoint of scholars, but it's also applicable to our staff as well. You know, during that year of the pandemic, school year 21-22, there was an automaticity of what we shifted immediately into because of the necessity of it, right? So everyone knew it was a necessity. This is not an option. And it's something that happened every day. For us to shift into the Virtual Friday and that virtual experience that had been previously experienced all week for one day, that took some mindset shifting for scholars and parents to get into the automatic rhythm of that. And then for our new teachers who weren't with us during the pandemic year, it took some lifting for us to help them to understand what true engagement looks like in the virtual setting. And so a big priority for our organization over the past several years before the pandemic has really been lifting up scholar discourse engagement in the classrooms. And so the good news is Virtual Friday gave us this forum to really sharpen our chops with that, especially with our new staff coming in. And so we're doing some exciting refinement of work. We're actually purchasing some additional new platforms to support with engagement on Virtual Friday that really can replicate and then take to the next level some of the things that we saw and experienced during the pandemic. And then we were able to replicate this year for the Virtual Friday. I think the last thing I'll say to answer your question as far as a challenge that has given us some information to help refine our process is around when we look at the collaboration of our staff. One thing that we are so proud of is, not unlike other LEAs, common planning time and collaboration amongst teachers in the course are really important. Because we have such a high population of scholars with IEPs and L scholars at our schools, many of our classrooms have a general education teacher, an L co-teacher, and a special education co-teacher. And because of the madness of master scheduling, it has oftentimes been a very difficult challenge to get what we call course team collaboration. We were able to knock that out for every course team this year for the first time in our effort in trying to do that because of the flexibility that Virtual Friday provided us. Because not all of our staff had that flexibility Monday through Thursday. And as Dr. White said, we eliminated transition time, movement time, et cetera, and we're able to get some additional, what I call leadership development minutes, teacher development minutes to address that. And so we're excited to continue with that. That's a necessity for us. That's critical. That's not an option. We have to have that in order to be able to fulfill our commitment and our vision for collective ownership of children. Because at Paul, what's happening with the children is not just the general education teacher, but it's all. And I'll stop there. That's just an explanation of some of the challenges and just some of our lessons learned and the refinement we're looking for the upcoming school year.
Thank you, Ms. Dan, on all of that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Good evening. Good evening. I am really excited for you all to be back here. I reviewed my notes from the last time. Yes, I have notes from last time. And there are a couple of questions I think just are quick hit questions. I'm just curious how it worked out for you all. One of the concerns you all raised was around reliable internet for students. I'm curious around how did you address that throughout the year? What did you see and what was the response? I have a couple of other quick hits, so just a quick response. I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, really quickly, that was not a huge issue for us at all. And I think interestingly enough, it was because of the pandemic, because we had to get to a place where most homes had internet reliability. I would probably say at best we had maybe 10 families in the same way that we intervened and either provided hotspots or for those families, if we could not resolve it quickly, brought them into the school. So that was not a huge challenge for us at all.
Okay. The next question was around the meals program for students who've experienced food insecurities. You mentioned that you all had an idea to support with meals distribution, but how did that go and how many students participated in that?
Yeah, so we opened it up so if families needed that support or students needed that support, either families could ask and we would provide, food for the children on Thursday for Friday. Or the students could ask and we would provide food for them. Again, probably we had less than 10 families who needed that type of support. I would also say that part of that sometimes is connected to the group, the age level and the groups of students that we serve, because our children are middle school and high school, but they know how to advocate for themselves. And if there were children who wanted some extra food to take home for Friday, then we provided that for them.
Excellent. One last question. One of the other things that was raised was around, or questions that was raised around students who just, as educators perform better in person. And one of the things that you all mentioned was around, I think with some of your smaller learning communities, that you would have some sort of flexibility around offering. So if it just, didn't work, and this isn't the for kids who just didn't participate, but this is just specifically for children who you all knew from the very beginning, Virtual Fridays wasn't for them. I'm curious how that worked out, and how did you kind of fold that into what you all were doing and planning?
Yeah, and so I'll let Span, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can take that very quickly. So when we did our surveys for Virtual Friday before we started, we actually were proactive in asking parents our knowledge of the scholars, our relationships with the families. Are there any families who want to discuss the possible option of in-person? So from at the beginning of the school year, we had a very small subset of scholars who came into the building for very different and unique reasons. Our way of approaching that was to make sure we leveraged all of our staff members, particularly our culture team. And so we have invested a lot in the development of our culture leaders to support our learning of scholars, not just discipline of scholars. And so we were able to rely on our culture team members and admin on campus for that each day. So there was rotations amongst the admin team. And we had a rotation of teachers, general education, special education, and L teachers who would come to support the scholars. So it wasn't just the scholars on campus in a screen, accessing instruction, not having anyone with an instructional lens to support them. So it went well. As Dr. Wright said, we never really had more than approximately 25 scholars for our middle school. And we probably had even fewer for our high school, because again, our middle school scholars were the ones who we knowing the families, knowing them, as you alluded to, we knew that some of them needed to be in the building. And it was also excited because we were able to give them the movement breaks and kind of keep an eye on them and do some things to support them to engage in their virtual classes.
Got it. Last one and I'll hush. Connected to the in-person learning in the building, did you see an increase towards the end of the year of students who were brought into the building? If so, why did that happen?
I'll answer that very briefly. There were some unique seasons and times in second semester if families were having challenges outside of their control with Wi-Fi or technology where we didn't have time to waste. We're not going to waste time at Paul. And so we would bring families into the building on a case-by-case situation. There was never an onslaught of parents who decided, oh, Virtual Friday is not working for me, so I want to bring my child in. And so we handled that as we do everything else as the data guided us to. And so knowing the families, hearing the scholars, if a parent reached out and there was a certain situation. And the last thing I'll say is, for many of the scholars, it wasn't necessarily the entirety of the year. Like if they started off virtual accessing and there was a temporary time they needs to come in, we would accommodate that and then they can go back virtual. So it worked out well. We handled it on a case-by-case situation. It was never a large subset of scholars.
Awesome, thank you. I've been very anxiously awaiting from the time that we first met, kind of how that worked out. Thank you all.
Thanks very much, team, for the presentation. It's exciting to see that you've come back with a year of data and that the data are really promising. And in fact, the thing that makes me most inclined to be supportive here is in fact just looking at the strength of the data and the strength of the performance data. My one asterisk or caution there is how you disentangle that. You can't really from let's call it just a natural rebound that would happen from 21-22 to 22-23, right? I think we all agree 21-22 was kind of the depths of things in terms of where the sort of scores and outcomes landed. And again, I don't think it's actually possible to do that disentangling. I think my question for you is, if this approval is granted and you sort of are allowed to do this is the state of things, it's in your charter now, how will you continue to sort of hold yourselves accountable and follow where the data lead, where if it turns out, hey, there was something that's not quite working about it, it's actually detrimental in some way, to adjust the program within the bounds of the new charter, but also to come back to us and say, hey, there are more things we've learned. And there are other things we need to sort of change or to figure out in order to make this program work well. So I'd just love to hear you opine on that a little bit.
Yeah, so a couple of things. It is very hard to kind of detangle, the different interventions that we have in place that have contributed to our students' growth. However, the one point that I will say is that when you look at our data during the period of time that we were fully virtual, if you look at both our MAP data and you look at our interim assessment data, interestingly enough, our student data points were very strong in MAP and our interim assessment data during the period of time that we were fully virtual. And last year, when we were fully back in person, that was a bit more of a struggle. And I think that we're starting to see some of that rebound because now we have this hybrid space. And so it's hard to detangle those things, but I would say that there's a lot of value in children having the opportunity to learn in the modality that they spend the bulk of their time. And the reality of it is that children today spend the bulk of their time in the modality of being engaged with technology in some way, shape, or form. And so I think one of the things, multiple different things, Ms. Spann spoke to the fact that we do a lot of work around analysis of data and connecting our data to what types of programmatic shifts that we need to make. We use platforms that actually have an associated data stream with them. And so that data stream tells us information about usage, and it also tells us information about performance. And one of the things that we would consistently keep in place is some sort of platform or programming that gives us data that is a little bit more unique to the Virtual Friday program to help us know, whether or not there are programmatic shifts that we need to make. The other thing is I think we've become clearer around kind of the if-then of virtual programming, right? if our students need additional time and individual attention to do better on in dual enrollment courses, then Virtual Friday should be a contributing factor to those students' success. And so there are a bunch of if-then, kind of statements or relationships that we have between the data that we see and the work that we do on Virtual Friday, that again, it serves as a beacon. It's not the only thing. I keep saying that over and over again, because we've had to say that internally to ourselves as well, but it is information that lets us know whether or not the Virtual Friday program is helping or whether or not it needs to be adjusted.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, my encouragement to you all would be, again, since you're pioneering this, even for the sector, and certainly, I think in general, right? Like that, you're almost giving yourselves like a different canvas to paint on for redesigning school on Fridays. And it sounds as if there are lots of different options to think about that. We always talk about sort of blowing up the way things happen in order to kind of, really redesign for learning. And it just strikes me this as a real opportunity, but we wouldn't want the learning to stop at the moment when, you sort of get the charter approval. And I think it sounds like your deeper why here is fundamentally about, and it absolutely must be, improving outcomes for your kids. And if that's true, then kind of pursuing that and letting the rest of us in on kind of the lessons learned from that during that time, I think will be really valuable.
Yeah, and I have to say, I would be remiss if I did not say that the staff at Paul Public Charter Schools, they are an amazing group of human beings. And there were times, as Ms. Spann talked about, the complexities of really figuring this out. Like if you're going to blow up any aspect of school, putting it back together in a way that serves children properly is difficult. And I also have to say it is scary. It's just like, oh my gosh, this does not look like it's working. And there's ease and comfort in doing things that you have already learned how to do really, really well. And so what I appreciate about our staff is when those difficult moments came, we had whole staff meetings where it was like, okay, listen, like, what do we need to shift? What do we need to tweak? What's working? How's it? So I say all that to say that we have a full team of 100+ staff members that is both invested and committed to making sure that this is a new thing, an innovative thing that is absolutely beneficial for children. And if they don't feel like it is, then they will absolutely ring the alarm.
Great. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Dr. White, I had two quick follow-up questions here. One, could you just clarify for us what assessments Paul is using for the interim assessment? And the second question is, in anticipation of, I don't know the details around timing of when ESSER dollars kind of are done, but how might that impact the continuation of this program and the need to maintain it?
Yeah. So first, really quickly for the interim assessments, well, let me respond to the ESSER dollars piece, and then I'll let Ms. Spann speak very quickly to the interim assessments. The interim assessments have been in place in our organization for 6 years, and they have gone through several layers of validation. And also we've had them looked at closely by EdOps on a 2-year cycle, just to draw connections between our students' performance on interim assessments and PARC, so that there is some connectivity between those. So I'll let Ms. Spann talk about that. But in terms of our ESSER dollars, we've had a really good team of people to help manage our finances. You may know one of them. His name is Will Henderson. That name may ring a bell. And what we did at Paul was when we received that money, we stretched it and we decided that we were not going to use it to blow up a staffing model or other things that when that money went away would result in us having to do something drastically different relative to the way that we live day in and day out in our organization. And so shortly said that, those monies leaving, we are going to miss them, but we stretch them out across all of these years. We're getting to the last, tail end of the money that we have left, but it does not result in us having to do anything substantively different as an organization. And then the one last piece that I'll add to that, we are, because this is really exciting news, We are 51 students fully enrolled right now over the number we budgeted for next year. And so that has never happened. We are on deck to have probably the highest number of students in our organization that we've ever had. And we do believe that there's some connectivity to our Virtual Friday program that is, part of the reason why we're seeing ourselves, accomplish that target right now.
Congratulations.
I'll just quickly add, Dr. White actually responded to your question in reference to our interims, the creation of them. Our first year here, we had an external provider who was creating the interims. We realized that those interims weren't as Common Core aligned as we needed them to be. And so since school year 2018-19, we created the interims in-house. For the past 3 years, we've evolved to the point where we have gotten to a consistency with our interims, meaning that we've tested out test items, ensured alignment to PARC, done some studies with EdOps to look at the predictability factor of our interims towards PARC performance, scale score, as well as the levels. And so that has helped us to really get to what we feel is a sound place with some quality interims that give us sound information on the priority standards that we're working on each advisory. So they're created in-house.
Dr. White and Ms. Span, thank you for your very clear presentations on the Virtual Fridays. Dr. White, I particularly appreciated your very concise rules on effective virtual participation. I spend a lot of my life in Zoom meetings with people who would benefit from your tips. I encourage you to make a TikTok or a YouTube video. My questions are about the degree of demonstrated support among parents and staff for Virtual Fridays. When we approved the pilot last year, we required that you demonstrate that at least 51% of the parents and 51% of the staff support Virtual Fridays. And because of what I understand to be low response rates to the surveys that you distributed, I don't think you've been able to do that. Now, my understanding is you did 2 family surveys, one that had a response rate of 52%, the other had 29%. Do you know to what extent the second had the response rate of 29%? Was that 29% different people from the ones who responded to the first survey of 52? Can you add those two together, or were they both surveys of the same population?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking that question. And so when I saw the report from the staff, I immediately reached out to Tricia because I realized that we did not do a good job of explaining our parent survey data. When that stipulation or condition was placed into the pilot year, we knew from the outset it was going to be hard for us to meet that target. And the reason why is that I am like a lot of people where I only fill out surveys if I'm upset. And that's just how I am. And so we knew that it was going to take a lot of drumming up to get survey responses for our families. And so we set from the outset 2 survey windows in place, always knowing that, we were going to have one in December, and then we were going to try to pick up anyone who did not respond in December when we did our second survey in May. And so those were unique responses. I have my numbers here. We have 694 students that were enrolled last year. 30 of them share, the same families. And so at least 664 parent or guardian opinions to gather. We had survey responses for families that represented 482 of our students. And of the 482 family responses, 348 of them, which is approximately 72%, it was like 71.9%, were in favor of the Virtual Friday program. Another 17% were neutral. And then for the families, there was less than 9% that disagreed that the program was beneficial. We followed up with those families to kind of get to the core reasons why they did not find it to be beneficial. And by and large, it had a lot to do with just kind of needing tighter supervision during that period. So that was a long way to answer that we have responses from 482 of the 664 families that we served. across those 2 survey periods.
And among those, did you say 482?
We had 482 and 348 agreed or strongly agreed that Virtual Friday was beneficial.
Is 348 more or less than 51%?
It's about 50.23%.
Okay.
It's like 50.231 something.
What about staff? You had about a 35%?
So there's an addendum that we had 2 ways that we gathered data from staff, because it wasn't necessarily required, but we needed to do that to like make sure that, you know, our staff was in favor and to figure out what the major challenges and or issues were. And so we did an optional staff survey in Q2, and 35% of staff responded to the survey. However, 100% of our staff members has a one-on-one meeting with someone from HR twice a year. And the key guiding question for those one-on-one interviews that they do twice a year was, how's Virtual Friday working? And the overwhelming majority, it was over 80% of our staff, was strongly in favor and agreed that the Virtual Friday was beneficial both to students and to them as staff members. The survey was kind of our tertiary way of collecting data. And again, it was optional. If you wanted to provide some feedback in the survey, you could. If you didn't feel like you needed to because you spoke to HR already, then you didn't have to.
Thank you. You've addressed my concerns. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. White, Ms. Span, for joining us for this evening. We appreciate your service and we look forward to seeing you again. I think it'll be at the next month's meeting. We'll vote on this.
Yep, thank you. Have a good rest of your evening.
Thank you. Okay, board members, may I have a motion to approve this evening's agenda?
So moved.
Great, we will take a roll call vote, and board member Shakura Adamafania this evening will take a roll call vote.
Thank you.
We need a second first.
Second.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you. Board member Nick Rodriguez.
Aye.
Board member Jim Sandman.
Aye.
Chair Leah Cruzy.
Aye.
Board member Ricardo Ganjan.
She is absent, but I have her proxy vote approving the agenda.
Board member Chantel Wright is absent, and I am an aye. Did I do that right?
Passes. Thank you. Next on our agenda is the final charter review of this cycle. For that, I yield the floor to Melody Sampson, Interim Chief of School Performance, to introduce Friendship Public Charter School's 25-year charter review. I would also like to invite representatives from Friendship Public Charter School to provide remarks regarding their charter review. Mr. Donald Hentz, Chairman of the Board, Ms. Pat Brantley, Bilka Scott Marcus, Zach Morford, and Monique Miller. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Cruzy. Good evening, everyone. I am Melody Sampson, Interim Chief School Performance Officer. Tonight, the board will vote on the charter review and continuance of Friendship Public Charter School. The following charter review standard applies to the school. The School Reform Act stipulates that DCPCSB shall review a school's charter at least once every 5 years. As part of this review, DCPCSB must determine whether the school committed a violation of applicable law or a material violation of the terms, conditions, standards, or procedures set forth in its charter, including violations relating to the education of children with disabilities, and whether the school failed to meet the goals and student academic achievement expectations set forth in its charter. If DCPCSB determines that a school has committed a violation of applicable law or a material violation of the terms of its charter, or has not met its goals, the board may, at its discretion, revoke the school's charter or grant the school a conditional continuance. Additionally, there is a fiscal component to the charter review. Per the School Reform Act, the board is required to revoke a school's charter if it determines the school has engaged in a pattern of non-adherence to generally accepted accounting principles, has engaged in a pattern of fiscal mismanagement, or is no longer economically viable. Friendship Public Charter School is up for its 25-year review. The school enrolls 4,609 students in grades pre-K 3 through 12 across 15 campuses. Friendship Public Charter School adopted the PMF as its charter goals, committing to achieving an average PMF score equal to or exceeding 50% at all but 2 of its campuses. The school committed Friendship Public Charter School Ideal Elementary and Friendship Public Charter School Ideal Middle to achieving an average PMF score equal to or exceeding 40% over the review period. DC PCSB staff concluded 11 applicable Friendship Public Charter School campuses met their charter goals. Per the COVID-19 impact policy, DC PCSB staff did not render a goals attainment determination for four of the Friendship campuses that opened between school year 1819 and 1920, because these schools have 1 or fewer years of pre-pandemic data. DC PCSB staff determined the school has not committed a material violation of law or of its charter, has adhered to generally accepted accounting principles, has not engaged in a pattern of fiscal mismanagement, and is economically viable. Based on these findings, DC PCSB staff recommends that the board vote to continue the school's charter. Representatives from the school are available to speak about the school's performance over the past 5 years, and to answer the board's questions.
Welcome, Friendship team.
Thank you, Melody. We have a brief presentation and we'll share the screen. But as that is coming up, good evening, I'm Pat Brantley. I serve as CEO of Friendship Public Charter School. On behalf of the entire Friendship community, we are honored to be here for our 25-year review. I especially want to thank tonight the Friendship family members, alumni, and staff who gave testimony and those who are supporting us by watching from home. We appreciate the opportunity to serve the students for which we were founded and deeply value the trust that family placed in us year after year. When Friendship was founded, our vision was to provide a world-class education that would empower all students, but especially those often considered the farthest from opportunity. Today, we operate 15 middle, elementary, and high school campuses in 5 DC wards. We educate thousands of students each day and have produced college-educated and accomplished alumni. With high graduation rates, millions in scholarships earned, and high college acceptances, we are proud of what our students are accomplishing. For the past 25 years, and for all those that are ahead, we remain steadfast in our mission, ensuring readiness for academics and life by focusing on achievement, mindset, and core values. But while our mission remains unchanged, the tools that we have to accomplish that mission, the accountabilities which we embrace, and the pandemic we must still overcome, well, those have changed. Yet we are here to meet every challenge, using what we have learned and what we have done to accelerate our journey to 30. We will strengthen our impact through a number of strategies that are focused on accelerating achievement, providing greater supports for all scholars, and delivering on the Friendship graduate profile. In our journey to 30, we are aiming higher. Our focus is on college and career readiness and high levels of growth as measured by your framework and our own. We are committed to overcoming pandemic losses and returning all of our campuses to an even steeper trajectory of performance with substantial gains in proficiency, selective college admissions, and our own internal measure of success. While our history of growth and achievement is noteworthy, the ultimate measure of our success are the pathways students create for themselves. Friendship student and alumni are Google Science Fair winners, Gates Millennium Scholars, HBCU and Ivy League graduates, NFL stars, and doctoral candidates. They are teachers, advocates, engineers, and business owners. They are the embodiment of our mission. As we reflect both on our history and our future, I'd like you to hear from the young people whom we have been focused on from our beginnings. Let's watch.
Friendship provided me a venue to where I could be the best high school student I could. That really prepared me for college and then, post-college and postgraduate.
Friendship was special because they had just, incredible teachers.
Because of those teachers, I feel like I've been developed and shaped into who I am today. They treated me and gave me the support I needed.
It goes beyond teaching in the classroom, the ABCs. It's how you doing today? What's going on at home? How can I help you?
That human capital, like that's the greatest secret that friendship has, is the teachers.
And I think that's what friendship is tasked with, is to recognize these gems inside of their students.
The mission is always to graduate self-sufficient, well-rounded people. And, you know, at the end of the day, that's what gets accomplished.
Finally, as I end, I'd like to say this. I am proud and I thank you and the entire community of families, students, volunteers, educators, staff, and elected officials who made charters a possibility in this city. I am proud to be part of the 25-year cohort of charters. In the early days, we sought to show that charters could be a productive and driving part of the public education landscape. At Friendship, we seek to continue to do that, and we can't wait to show you all that our children, families, and staff can do and have done when you next review us at our 30-year renewal. Thank you for the opportunity to be heard. We look forward to any questions you might have.
It's interesting that we get to this moment. We were one of the first charter schools in the nation. We're the largest Black-run charter school in the nation. And over these 25 years, we have managed more than $1 billion in public funds, and not one dime has been mismanaged. We've not had one scandal. And I say that because I believe that the charter board should be celebrating the schools that are celebrating their 25th anniversary. You have no idea what we went through to start charters in the District of Columbia. It was me. It was Raj Vinakota. It was the lady Elsie Whitlow Stokes. We went from church to church to church to church, explaining to people what charter schools were. And every place we went, they sent a cohort of union members from DCPS to scream us down. There needs to be a celebration, and you ought to be in charge of it. Okay.
Thank you. As you can tell, we feel passionately about charters operating in the District of Columbia. And I will say from all of us at Friendship, we thank you, but also I must acknowledge the hard work of your staff. And that I will take it as a celebration that the staff recommended our continuance for not only meeting our goals, but also being in compliance with applicable laws and being financially sound. So thank you. And with that, if there are any questions for us, oh, I should also acknowledge we have a few board members that are in the room and our staff here. Any of us are open to answer any questions that you have.
Let me begin by thanking you and congratulating you. What a privilege it is to be here. And I'm looking through the list of schools that have celebrated their LEAs that have celebrated their 25 years beginning this year. And it's remarkable. If your shoulders are tired, it's because there's a whole lot of people standing on them here and well beyond DC because of lives that have taken us in careers that have taken people well beyond the District of Columbia. So thank you for this presentation, for sharing this tonight. And this is one of those moments that if we had been in our before time configuration of meetings in person, we would have had to set aside a lot of time for all the public comment that would have been lined up outside the door from before the meeting got started. I'd like to open up first to see if other board members want to kick off with some questions. And then I'll follow up with some of my own.
And thank you, Chair Cruzy. Good evening, Friendship team. Again, I echo the same congratulations. I was actually a student when Friendship got started in DC public school. So I actually do remember what happened. And I remember when some of my friends attended first. So while I didn't have the technical knowledge, I was a student and I saw. So it's quite amazing and kind of telling about how much time has passed that we sit here today. So congratulations. You all should be very proud. It sounds like you are. I am as well of you all and the work that you've done. One question I do have, as you think about both the last 5 years and think about the future, sort of, what are you most proud about, but then also what are you focused on over the next 5 years to sort of continue to push Friendship's impact on our city?
So the answer to what we are most proud of, it always is, it always will be, it's the young people. I mean, the young people at Friendship are amazing. You heard from a few of them today. They are doing such wonderful things in the world. And it is the way that when we see our young people moving throughout the city and in our schools and leaving us and going to college, we have heard young people talk, yes, about the journey, about the challenges, but their successes tell us that we are doing the right work with them, their character, their resiliency, their progress. But when I think about the last few years, it's still the people, but it's staff. I am proud that in our charter review, the external observers that you sent for the quality school review, they said across Friendship at every campus and in our classrooms, we saw real love and regard for students, not just about the academic work, and I'm going to misquote this, but essentially what they said was that our teachers and staff knew the students, asking them about their families, their siblings, and whatever we're going through. And I don't think that we can do this work at Friendship without a deep sense of regard for the young people that we have and without love for it. And it's been difficult, as you can imagine, for staff in schools. But I am proud to say that Friendship staff has stood up in every way possible. So, what are we focused on and what we look forward to get to the second part of your question? The reality for us is that we have seen tremendous growth over time in the city, but at Friendship. There's a reason that DC is considered the fastest growing urban school, at least it was before the pandemic, when the exam results. When we went from DC Pass to Park, scores were pretty low, but there was a trajectory or an incline that was in place, and we saw at Friendship, but also in the city, a doubling of proficient performance from DC Pass to pre-pandemic, slightly less steep trajectory in math, but still an improvement. We're focused on putting our schools and our students back on that trajectory, but making it steeper, right? We've done it before. We've done it at the city. We've done it at Friendship. The question is, can we do it faster now? And so we're taking all that we learned over the past few years and we are firmly fixed on proficiency. And I know this is going to sound to people like it's test heavy, and it is. 4+ proficiency makes a difference to our students in terms of completing college, getting scholarships, and admissions to selected colleges. So that's one of our key focuses, but it is also science and reading. That is a big part of what we are doing. Social services and supports, that is a big part of the work that we are doing. And exposure, also within Friendship, we want to ensure that our scholar voice is elevated. And so we're doing a lot of work in our strategic plan around our graduate profile. So that's somewhat of our focuses as we go forward.
Awesome, thank you.
I think I would only add that we are also, as Pat has mentioned, capitalizing on our people and recognizing where our people soar. And where our people soar are in the classroom. And so how do we make the practices that we know work permeable across our campuses and in every classroom, in every building? So keeping our expectation of excellence high at all times.
Thank you.
I want to join my fellow members in commending you all for getting to this point and for being really, a pioneer for the rest of the sector that all of us look to. I also want to commend you all as you just look down the sort of PMF score table to sort of operate, a significant sized LEA that's grown a lot in these last 5 years. And to have every campus meet the criteria, I think is no small feat. I have 2 questions that are sort of related, so you can sort of take them as you see fit on that, which is to say, number one, you've experienced a lot of growth over this review. Some of that's been through takeovers, some of that's been through mergers. And what have you learned from doing that? And I think what would it take to continue sort of this pattern of growing, but also maintaining and even improving quality for all kids? Because obviously that's what we all want from kind of any charter school LEA, and for those like you that are of significant size, to be thinking about combining scale with quality is a key question. So we'd just love to hear your thoughts on the last 5 years, and what do you think it'll take to sustain that for the next 5?
So when we think about the schools that we have adopted or merged into Friendship, we can see very clearly the progress of those students. We use NWA map to measure growth. But even in places where there is very high growth, that doesn't lead immediately in 1 year to high PARCC scores. And so for us, it's about retaining teachers and high re-enrollment of students, right? The longer students are with us, the better they do. And so we're focused on creating environments where we are both retaining staff and the children that we serve, because that is going to support the work that we do. Even while we have grown, we may not have had part in some of those years from the pandemic, but Friendship internally did do NWEA map to look at median growth or visual growth percentile across our schools, and then max predictions on PARCC performance. And so at our newer places, Ideal Elementary and Middle, Southeast Middle, somewhat new, Armstrong Middle, we can see higher performance through MAP. So that's part of the answer, which is looking backwards somewhat. But yes, we've learned a lot in the takeovers, and part of that is we must start immediately on day 1, delivering what Friendship looks like with Friendship systems. I would say in the past, we were perhaps a longer trajectory for moving people into our systems. We don't do that anymore. And so I hope that you all will come out and visit Ideal and talk to some of the staff that are there at Ideal that had been there before, because what they will tell you is the systems, the resources, the predictability, the professional development, the administrator supports, those are the things that are helping us to deliver better opportunities in every classroom. Hope I answered your question.
Yeah, no, I think my question, like my other part was simply, what does it take to, whether it's organically or inorganically, what will it take to kind of continue a trajectory of increasing scale and increasing quality?
I would say that I don't expect that Friendship will be increasing scale anytime soon. We are happy where we are, although I will say that our board does take seriously that there are students throughout the district who need us. That said, I think that quality is about replicating what we know has been very successful. It is looking not just over the past 5 years, but I'd say the past 10. So since we were in PARCC at where we have seen the highest trajectory of performance, and for us, that is generally combined with looping teachers or ensuring teachers sequentially through the grades are high levels of efficacy. So I understand. Yes.
Another sort of piece of that is the sort of content and pedagogy, like raising to the level of not just awareness, but practice, those practices that we know yield high results, and not just high results in student achievement, but high results in student climate, high results in student culture. Students have to want to come to school, parents have to want to send their children to any number of our campuses, and that we don't take lightly as well.
And then lastly, what I would say, because not everything is what we deliver from inside of Friendship. So I'm very glad to live and work in a city that has invested so much in public education. And so if you think about just recently the investments in teacher pay. That is making a difference to who we retain and who we keep in classrooms to have really high quality staff across our classrooms. I would also say I'm glad to live and work in a city that really is focused on accountability. So as you look for moving to the next iteration of the accountability framework, as you raise the bar, we all raise what we do. And so I think that that is also part of the answer for friendship.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for this. I understand during the pandemic, speaking of systems that work really well and how those having high quality systems and being able to learn from data and improve from that, during the pandemic, Friendship extended its online services to other LEAs across the district. Can you share with us some of the experiences and with how that process worked of offering those services across schools?
We can. First, just let me say, students have home communities or home schools. So the answer isn't always, if I want something, let me go someplace else. And so we were glad to be able to use online systems that we already had in place and ensure that families could stay in the school that they chose, but get what their children needed, particularly if those children were medically fragile, couldn't return back right away, or had other reasons. But Ken has led a lot of our online work and can speak to it.
Yeah, so during the pandemic, we serviced all different types of students. Initially, it was those students who were most fearful of, or their families were fearful of them to return. So we fully enrolled them into our online programs. We were able to support either their ELL needs or also their special education needs, while also working collaboratively with each one of the LEAs. Since that time, that's also kind of morphed into also supporting additional students through single courses that they might need for graduation, courses that they would love to explore. So different types of electives, CTE courses, and the like. So we now support those students who come to us both full-time and also part-time, working, like I said, collaboratively with each one of the districts. So our online staff is able to support them at least on a daily basis with live instruction, as well as meet with them, as well as our homeschool for home office needs or other individual needs that the students might have. So we offer a range of services both for special ed and also general ed students, also those students looking for dual enrollment as well as advanced placement.
One thing that I think is important that I hope as a city, as a charter sector, we can focus on is that you have students capable of doing all kinds of work and with all kinds of interests. But if schools are very small or may have particular themes, students don't actually get to experience courses that they might want. And so what we're proud of in online is that we see students choosing sort of one-off courses. We see middle school students that have greater access to algebra and advanced math, that have languages that, maybe there are only a few students in the school who want to study a particular language and you can't have a whole class for it. And so I believe that online and this way of distributing courses is really going to be a driver of equity in the city.
I asked the same question to the Paul community, and I'm curious, given you have a high number of students enrolling in your online program and you're probably leveraging technology based on what you've learned that you've been able to do the last couple of years, does the loss of COVID related relief funds, ESSER and otherwise, impact your ability to continue providing that kind of service, programmatic support and instructional support?
It doesn't impact our ability to provide specific online services. What that is impacting is that much of our funds, after we got past using ESSER funds for things like COVID testing and masks and HVAC upgrades, we focused that money on tutors, so high impact tutoring or high dosage tutoring, acceleration teachers, people to lead small groups in our classroom, additional mental health supports that were necessary. And so we're going to get to a period, the end of the school year coming, where students are still going to have gaps that need to be filled, but we will have less adults in buildings to do so. And so we are looking very specifically at restructuring our budgets. It was on one of the slides, I know we went through those fairly quickly, of looking at a new modeling design where we can distribute more master teachers and specialists across larger groups of students instead of a team teaching or cohort model. But any advocacy for extending those funds or ensuring that we have additional investments, particularly for at-risk students, I think that we all need to come together and make sure that that happens.
Further questions from the board?
I don't have any questions. I just want to congratulate you on 25 years and thank you for your service to the city. And I want to commend in particular your alumni who kicked off our hearing tonight for their very compelling and moving statements. This is an easy decision. I'm happy to vote to continue your charter.
Thank you.
Good segue. Colleagues, I will now entertain a motion.
I move to continue the charter of Friendship Public Charter School.
Second.
Thank you. Board member Adam Afanian will be able to take a roll call vote.
Thank you. Board member Nick Rodriguez.
Aye.
Vice Chair Jim Sandman.
Enthusiastic aye.
Chair Leah Cruzy.
Aye.
Board member Ricardo Ganjum.
She is not present, but I have her proxy vote. Aye.
Board member Chantel Wright is absent, and I am an enthusiastic aye as well. Congratulations.
Congratulations, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Cruzy, before we move on, may I just say a few words? We are at the end of our review cycle for this year. So I want to start by congratulating Friendship for making this 25-year milestone, but I also want to congratulate Carlos Rosario, Maya Angelou, E.W. Stokes, Cesar Chavez, and Seed, who have also accomplished that milestone this year. And I would say that every school that has had an opportunity to go through a review, whether it is 5 years, 10 years, or a 15-year renewal, is also achieving a milestone. I want to take this time to congratulate the staff as well for all of the hard work that they have done in completing this review cycle, a robust slate of schools. And in particular, I want to acknowledge the school quality and evaluation team led by Melody Sampson. And it's important to say that because Melody Sampson stepped into another role while also leading the school quality and evaluation team as our interim chief school performance officer. And also know that we have a robust review process, as was noted by CEO Brantley. And so want to also acknowledge our data and accountability team, our finance team, our equity and access team, and our compliance team, who all contribute to our comprehensive reviews. So thank you to the staff and also all of the LEAs who have robustly participated in this process. And board members, stay tuned for another full slate of reviews and renewals next year.
Thank you, Dr. Walker Davis. And the acknowledgement of the staff is worthy. This is, if the number of pages and the amount of data is any indication of the amount of work that must go into preparing these reports and the hard work by the LEAs and so many educators, there is a lot that goes into this. I am proud as a resident of this district to know that this independent government agency is looking with such a close eye at how schools are educating children to ensure that they are well prepared for the adulthoods that they seek to have for themselves. So thank you, Dr. Walker Davis, for that. For next, I'm actually going to yield the floor right back to you to introduce the next agenda item regarding the issuance of a financial corrective action plan for KIPP DC Public Charter School. And for that, I would like to invite representatives from the school to provide remarks. That includes Mr. Tony Lewis, Dustin Ellis, Katie Cole, Sawmill Shaw, and Susan Shepler.
Thank you. I'm looking to see a staff as the school is coming online. Shall I wait for the school to come up? Okay.
Mr. Ellis is the only one I'm seeing that it was in the queue.
I believe the others are waiting to be invited to join as panelists.
Aisha, they may all be under Shannon Hodge. I see 3 Shannon Hodges in the participant list.
Thank you.
And Ms. Scheffler, if you are listed, raise your hand so we can know which one to promote. Okay, Susan, do we have everyone?
Yes, I believe that is everyone that is coming this evening. And although many of us are named Shannon Hodge tonight, she actually is not going to be here.
Okay, thank you. I will begin now. Board members, tonight, staff recommends the board approve a financial corrective action plan for KIPP DC PCS. This recommendation is the formal conclusion of a thorough and lengthy process of financial oversight and monitoring we have been engaged with the school. By way of background, in fiscal year 2022, the school discovered it had been defrauded for approximately $2.2 million by a former employee for purchases for Chromebooks and content filtering software the school never received. Once the fraud was discovered, KIPP DC immediately reported it to the appropriate authorities, including DC PCSB. Since that time, staff and board members have engaged with the school extensively to understand the cause of the fraud and the corrective actions undertaken by the school to prevent fraud in the future. We met with the school multiple times over the course of several months to ask specific questions and review information, and we receive frequent updates on the school's corrective actions throughout this time. We've also regularly monitored the school's financial information and ongoing financial health. Under the School Reform Act, DC PCSB must revoke the charter of a school if it determines the school engaged in a pattern of non-adherence to generally accepted accounting principles, a pattern of fiscal mismanagement, or is no longer economically viable. As you'll see more fully described in the meeting materials for tonight available on our website, our review has determined that this incident of fraud does not meet any of these three standards. Further, we've found the corrective actions undertaken by the school, including strengthening its policies and internal accounting controls, are sufficient to address deficiencies and help prevent future fraud. However, the fraud incident does provide evidence of weaknesses in the school's internal controls that might have been prevented, mitigated, or allowed earlier detection of the fraud. DCPCSB staff therefore recommends that the board vote to approve a financial corrective action plan, or FCAP, that will allow us to formally monitor the corrective actions I mentioned so we can ensure the school continues to strengthen its internal controls and compliance to thwart future fraud in the future. We will provide regular public updates on the FCAP, and if the school fails to comply with the FCAP, staff will recommend the board cite the school for an instance of fiscal mismanagement. Representatives from KIPP DC PCS are here to share more about this incident, their response, and their ongoing corrective action. I will turn it over to KIPP DC.
Well, thank you, Dr. Walker. Is my volume okay, everybody? Thank you so much. Madam Chair, board members, let me thank you all for your time this evening and all the work you do on behalf of all of the students here in the District of Columbia. On behalf of the fellow board members of KIPP DC, we appreciate it, and I especially appreciate the opportunity to address you this evening. So thank you. We're grateful for the opportunity to share information on the organization's most challenging experience to date, what we've learned from it, and most importantly, what we're going to do on a going forward basis. I want to start with a brief summary, if I may, of the fraud that KIPP DC sustained during COVID. It was during the height of the pandemic when schools were operating in, as you know, unprecedented circumstances and trying to get technology into the hands of our students at home, that a single individual acting alone committed a serious crime against KIPP DC. As a result of KIPP DC's ongoing commitment to internal controls and financial management, we discovered the fraud. Since discovering the fraud, KIPP DC has been responsive and accountable. Specifically, KIPP DC immediately reported the fraud to me personally as board chair, to the DC U.S. Attorney's Office, and to the U.S. Department of Justice. As soon as DOJ cleared KIPP DC to do so, we also immediately informed the following key stakeholders: PCSB's president, general counsel, and board chair, the DC Office of Inspector General, the DC Office of Attorney General, and the Deputy Mayor of Education. Further, within days of discovery, KIPP DC proactively and voluntarily hired external counsel and a forensic accounting firm to conduct an investigation and to make recommendations for improving its practices. So 2 points I'll make. KIPP DC did have the right policy, and we're on track to receive over 80% of the stolen funds back, and no students have been or will be negatively impacted by this crime. Specifically, we had sufficient reserves to ensure students' needs were met. We had a $1 million crime insurance policy in place, and KIPP DC expects to recoup another $800,000 from DOJ's civil lawsuit. Now, we know that combating fraud is a constant process that requires oversight and expertise, and we welcome all the support we can get. This is why I created a special audit committee on the board with members with deep legal and financial experience. We meet quarterly to oversee the progress that KIPDC's management team is making in an effort to improve financial and asset management processes. You'll hear more about that. Before introducing the staff here with us today, who will speak in more detail about KIP's response to the fraud, I'd like to take just one moment to commend them. From the moment that KIPDC discovered this crime, the management team moved quickly and seriously to uncover and address this fraud. As challenging and as unfortunate as this experience has been for every member of the KIP family, I'm very proud of what KIPDC's response was individually and collectively. And so with that, allow me to introduce 4 members of KIPDC's leadership team who will provide you more details on KIPDC's continued work on this matter and who are absolutely ready to answer questions. Justin Ellis is KIPDC's Chief Financial Officer, and he'll discuss the changes to our financial practices. Samuel Shaw, KIPDC's Chief Information and Operations Officer, will discuss the changes to our technology, procurement, and asset management procedures. Susan Scheffler, our founder and executive director, will then provide reflections and closing remarks as we move forward. And also we have our general counsel, Katie Cole, who will be available to answer any questions. And she has worked literally every step of the way closely with your staff, and we appreciate all the work that's been done. So if I may, Madam Chair, I'll introduce Justin Ellis, who will begin the conversations around our financial practices.
Thank you, Tony. As Tony mentioned, as KIPDC learned of the fraud event, we took immediate steps to assess our existing control environment and implement improvements to bolster those internal controls. We also took advantage of this opportunity to make a broader set of changes across our financial policies and processes, even beyond the work we're doing to address the fraud specifically. We started by implementing the most critical and high priority recommendations from the legal investigation, forensic accountant investigation, and our own internal review to reduce the risk of future fraud. Importantly, these recommendations have resulted in KIPDC taking steps to refine and tighten control measures across all KIPDC policies and procedures, and working to achieve cutting-edge financial and operating control systems. Many of these items have already been completed, and others are in progress to implementation. Specifically, we took immediate steps to identify and close potential gaps in our policies, systems, and procedures related to vendor verification, asset tagging, purchasing, and payment approvals. We established a standalone federal grants procurement policy as a supplemental resource to our finance manual. We updated and clarified the KIPDC finance manual to include each person's role and responsibility in all essential procedures. We trained and retrained all employees who have approval and reporting roles under the KIPDC finance manual and asset management policy, or are involved with procurement, financial, or asset management processes on expectations, roles, and responsibilities. We've made organizational design changes to reflect our growing size, to better support our financial controls, to add dedicated capacity and expertise to key functions, and to allow for additional oversight. We created a dedicated CFO role so the organization would have more capacity to focus on financial responsibilities. We created a dedicated Chief Information Officer role with overall responsibility for IT systems across the organization. We created a Managing Director of Internal Compliance role to assess and monitor, manage, and address key risks associated with finance operations and select student-facing areas such as athletics and safety. We also added roles to our procurement and legal teams to support multiple new procurement efforts. Some of these steps involved immediate actions to clarify and tighten financial monitoring policies and procedures, such as improving our overall vendor contract management by reviewing and revising our new vendor approval processes and retraining staff on expectations and controls related to vendor verification. Improving overall control related to purchasing and payment approvals by reviewing and revising our accounts payable processes and retraining staff on expectations, roles, and responsibilities related to payment and purchase approvals, and purging our vendor list with any businesses who we haven't done any business with for over 3 years. We implemented a new whistleblower hotline and established a regular schedule for trainings and reminders of our whistleblower policy for all staff. Other steps have required longer-term efforts to update entire software systems that can automate the recommended controls, such as preparing an updated purchase order policy and the training materials needed to implement it, and evaluating the feasibility of implementing an enterprise resource planning software system to automate and require control compliance across all staff purchasing, approval, and payment functions. This is a time-sensitive and expensive process that even in its earliest planning stages has already delivered benefits to the organization. As we design our processes to achieve a best-in-class control environment for charters in the DC area. I'll turn now to my colleague, Somal Shah, KIPTC's CIOO, to speak to the changes we made to our asset management and technology procurement processes.
Thanks, Justin. Good evening, everyone. My colleague Justin spoke at length about how KIPTC has already improved and continues to strengthen our financial practices and policies. We also took many immediate steps to identify and close gaps in our policy systems and procedures with regard to asset management and technology procurement in particular. During COVID, like many schools around the country, our team worked hard to get thousands of devices to students as quickly as possible. At that time, our families were overwhelmingly satisfied with our ability to deliver those materials, in particular technology. However, as a result of this urgent need, some of our practices around asset management were not consistently followed. As you can imagine, it was difficult to follow many procedures with fidelity with so many people working remotely at the time. We have since made several changes to our protocols. To better manage our equipment moving forward, we've contracted with a local expert to conduct a third-party audit of all of our assets to create a new baseline in our asset management software. As part of this work, we also installed radio frequency identification tags to enable faster audits of movable assets in the future. All other equipment is now assigned to an individual user or location. We've implemented a new protocol for technology purchase where a vendor is not paid for an item requiring tagging until the item is marked as received within our help desk system. We now also conduct regular audits of our equipment to ensure everything is where we expect it to be and at appropriate quantities. And if it's not, we take immediate steps to remediate. We have also worked with a third party to support us in redefining our asset management policies and procedures with responsibilities laid out at the individual staff member level. As part of that process, we retrain staff on expectation, roles, and responsibilities related to those policies. We enhance the segregation of duties around purchasing and receipt of technology. Essentially, the individual doing the purchasing cannot confirm receipt. We now also utilize full service purchasing from preferred vendors, which includes asset tagging before we receive the goods when we anticipate making large purchases. When we make those large purchases, we also utilize a third-party warehouse for storage and tracking so that we don't overwhelm our ability to securely store equipment on site. We know there's still more work to do to align these policies across all purchasing at KIPTC, but we hope that our robust response to the situation thus far, in coordination with the Public Charter School Board and others, can provide a model of financial and operating controls for large K-12 school systems. As we move forward, we are happy to share what we've learned from this experience with others. Finally, I'll turn to our founder and executive director, Susan Scheffler, to conclude.
Thanks, Somal. As Tony, Justin, and Somal have shared, since discovering the fraud, we've learned a lot. We've made a lot of changes along the way, and it's become very clear that combating fraud is a constant process. This experience has been extremely hard, but I'm so proud of how our team has worked tirelessly to navigate this incredibly difficult situation with grace and courage. I also want to share thanks to the folks who have supported us, advised us, and held us accountable. The attorneys and the investigators from the Department of Justice and the DC U.S. Attorney's Office who took our calls seriously from the very beginning and worked hard and sensitively to uncover this crime. Gratitude to the PCSB staff, especially Dr. Walker Davis, Sarah Cheatham, and Michael Bayek, who created an environment of trust that ensured we could turn to PCSB as soon as the DOJ cleared us to do so. They stayed in constant communication with us every new challenge. And finally, thanks to the Public Charter School Board, who met with us and asked us tough questions without forgetting the fundamental tragedy at the heart of this experience. Thank you again for your time tonight. We're eager to work with you to learn from you and move forward, and we're happy to share lessons learned with the sector. And that's it for us. If you guys have questions.
Thank you, Chairman Lewis and members of the KIPP DC team. It has been many months since the PCSB was read into this, and though I know that it extended longer for you all, and appreciate your work and correspondence with us all along the way on this. And thank you for this presentation this evening. I also want to acknowledge that what happened at the beginning of all of this is a tragedy that I know has impacted the KIPP DC whole school community, and want to honor what has been, I know, a very, very difficult time for everyone. We understand that you had developed your own corrective action plan based on recommendations from the forensic accountant that you had engaged. Mr. Ellis walked us through some of it. Can you give us just a summary of what that plan had been, and read us into overall the status of the corrective actions against it so far?
Sure, yeah, we're happy to do that. If you can just give us 1 moment to pull up the list, I think we can start walking through.
I'd be happy to get started with this. So overall, when we received the recommendations from the internal forensic accounting investigation, the recommendations were broken into certain categories, which included asset management, governance, procurement, and systems, as well as accounts payable. Then we went further to take those recommendations, which were prioritized by the auditors, and do an assessment of our own internal prioritization. So generally speaking, we agreed with the recommendations that the auditors made, or the forensic auditors made. Then internally, we've defined a system for determining when recommendations have been completed. That internal system includes making sure that there's a policy in place, that staff, when applicable, have been trained on that policy, and that the overall policy or procedure is in place and communicated broadly to those who are impacted by it. Of the recommendations that have been given to us, we've made progress against a large number of them. I'd be happy to go into the specifics if that's helpful, but there are quite a few of the recommendations. But there are recommendations we've focused on the highest priority first. We've made our way through a large portion of those high priority items and continue to work through the list, and expect the completion to be completed sometime in fiscal year 2025.
I have a number of other questions here, but want to welcome other board members to offer other questions or invite more of a recap if they had not been involved in all of the conversations today.
I have a question about how the fraud went undetected for so long, for more than a year. As I understand it, KIPP ordered and paid for a large quantity of laptops that were never received. Why wouldn't you have noticed that you paid for a large quantity of laptops that never arrived at a time when you were desperate to get laptops into the hands of students?
Yeah, I'm happy to take this one. I wasn't in my current role at KIPP DC at the time, but I was at KIPP DC and remember this period well. So the fraud occurred, as you say, for a period over a little over a year, beginning in April 2020. It started right after COVID began, a period of time, which, as Tony mentioned, appended public education. I have a tough time right now, like thinking back to that time, because things feel really normal. But you might remember people were like wiping down groceries. There was a run on toilet paper. Like, it was a truly wild time, and people were working remotely. And so when we were ordering things into buildings, like, we didn't always have perfect visibility. I think it was hard to have visibility and fidelity with lots of processes. So I say some of that in jest, but just to give you an example of like what it was like in April of 2020. With that context set, I know then that our entire organization was dedicated to ensuring students got everything that they needed, and in this case, the technology, as you mentioned. The individual who was responsible for this fraud was in the middle of directing like an asset management software transition. So where we would typically have visibility into what devices we had where, we were literally changing the software out at the same time that this was happening, and that reduced our visibility. We also, at that time, were conducting audits every 6 months, and we stopped doing that during COVID because our focus was elsewhere. And in addition, while the fraud is really large on its face, it actually occurred in multiple smaller transactions that were really less likely to raise suspicion given the scale of technology purchases occurring during COVID with us and with others. And then finally, it was simply just not possible to prevent all fraud. I have thought a ton about this as we've experienced this over the last 1.5 to 2 years. Information shared from our auditor and research reported in the New York Times earlier this year showed that only about 1/3 of fraud ever becomes public. And so what's even more critical is how we all respond when something like this happens. This particular fraud was not found by any outside party, not our auditor, not any government oversight body. Instead, we at KIPP-DC found it, we reported it, we supported the swift investigation of it, and we're now on track to recoup the vast majority of funds stolen. And I'm confident that our organization will be stronger as a result. And so while I wish this fraud had never occurred and then we had even better measures in place to detect and prevent it, we ask that you consider that it was perpetrated at the height of the pandemic by a trusted individual who ran the technology team and who exploited several weaknesses in our systems, many of which he himself orchestrated. As soon as we had any suspicion that this had occurred, we responded swiftly, robustly, and transparently, working with all of our partners in lockstep.
Thank you. I'm still not clear on something. I think I have an understanding of what happened, but I'd like you to confirm it. My question was, how could you spend $2 million on laptops and they never arrived and you didn't notice that they never arrived? My understanding is that the orders that were fraudulent were actually duplicative orders, that there were other laptops that were ordered and paid for that were processed correctly. So you were getting laptops into the hands of students and didn't know about these duplicative orders that never came to anybody's attention beyond the single person who was responsible for the fraud. Is that accurate?
That's generally accurate. What I would say is like we also had devices that were already on campuses. And so oftentimes if there was ever a need or a family came in or they requested a device, we would just mail out devices that we already had on campus. So it's not necessarily that we were like buying double the number of laptops. We were just using whatever that we had, whether that was on site because we already had a one-to-one program on site. And in other cases, yes, we did probably make a few duplicate purchases. So it was a combination of things, but I think all exacerbated by the fact that we did not have an asset management system that was accurately reflecting everything that we had purchased, everything we had, everything that we were shipping out.
Well, thank you. I think that last point is important, and I appreciate your acknowledging it, that deficiencies in internal controls and practices permitted this to happen and to go undetected for the period that it did. And I appreciate your owning that and taking steps to correct it. Susan mentioned, I think at the end, if I caught it, something about lessons learned and sharing them. My take on one thing that happened here was that KIPP did not, as it grew, adapt its practices to take account of the reality that a larger organization needs different internal controls and stronger policies and practices than a smaller organization might need, and that you constantly need to be reassessing where you are and whether you need to have new and improved or different policies and procedures and internal controls. Can you summarize at a high level lessons learned here and what the broader public charter school community might learn from your experience so that we minimize the chances that anything like this will happen elsewhere?
I'm happy to start this one off, and I'm sure lots of folks have lessons learned. So like one is that like fraud can and does happen anywhere, sometimes where you least expect it, and sometimes by people who you might otherwise like and respect. Everyone in an organization has a responsibility to detect and report fraud, and there are certainly many places where we might have identified this issue sooner. Nothing, though, can replace regular training, communications, and accountability around financial and operational control. These are just the most critical things to ensuring that they're carried out with fidelity. So it's not the controls itself, it's the communication and accountability around the controls. I think when implemented well, the controls can actually make operations more efficient and effective. They don't have to be a net negative if you're implementing them correctly. And then I think, most importantly for me, I'm like just really proud of like my lesson learned is like I've thrown myself in with a good lot because of how this group has responded. I'm really happy to say that every person, when we found that this happened, did the right thing without any hesitation.
Thank you for this, and kind of building on Mr. Vice Chairman Sandman's questions, and then taking a step back from my earlier question, can you kind of recount for us the chronology of how you first became aware of the fraud and what steps you had taken immediately after discovery?
Yeah, I can start this one. I think I might have some of the most context. So I moved into this chief information officer role probably in about September of the year in which we found this. Over the next month, I was transitioning with the person who committed this fraud and was taking a deeper look at all of our systems, our vendors, all the various things we did. As I mentioned, COVID was a sort of a messy time. And so we did have some duplicative, not only like, assets, but like systems. And that is pretty typical of lots of large organizations that I'm in. You get shadow IT departments. You don't know like what different teams are purchasing. And so in the process of evaluating a lot of those purchases, one thing that came to light about, I believe it was December 6th, there was a sort of Amazon Web Services outage, which impacted a particular piece of content filtering software. And that triggered for me that, hey, we have these two pieces of content filtering software. I began to look into that. And I would say within the next week, I had additional suspicions and reported them to our executive team. And I would say within the next week, we had reported it to all the individuals that our team has already mentioned. Leah, I don't know if that is sufficiently answered your question, but that was sort of when we found this to when we reported it. And then we were basically following along with the DOJ's guidance in terms of what we can communicate and do.
So about how much time passed between your discovery internally and contacting the authorities?
3 days. I'd say when we had a suspicion, we looked at a few additional things internally just to like confirm, and within 3 days we had spoken with authorities.
Thank you.
So thank you, team, for your presentation. And like my colleague said, the engagement in this process. A question that I have is that this FCAP will provide us a formal way to monitor your corrective action plan. But I'm curious to know who at the school is going to be responsible for oversight of this plan. And then what role will your board play with regard to this, the oversight of the plan?
I'm happy to get started here. In terms of the overall corrective action plan, I think it will be, there will be two individuals responsible for it, both myself and our president, Shannon Hodge. The portions that I'll be most involved with will be around our financial controls, policies, procedures, and trainings. The portion of the FCAP that's related to the internal audit as we were referring to the role internally, the managing director of internal compliance. That is a role that reports directly to both our president, Shannon Hodge, as well as the audit committee, which Tony referred to earlier in the presentation. Did that address your question appropriately?
Yes, part one. And then the second part is, I guess, more insight to this audit committee or how else the board plans to oversee this plan as well.
So the audit committee was established last year. Initially, the full board took full responsibility to understand exactly what was going on in the process, what timing, what was going first, second, and third, priorities, new hires, et cetera, in an effort to make sure that we had the proper level of accountability and the proper level of expertise. I created the audit committee to meet quarterly with both members of the executive team and any members of the larger team who have responsibility for individual measures that are being examined. And so that process will continue until we conclude with all of the recommendations that we have decided to move forward with as KIPDC.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Leah. Sorry.
I've asked a number of questions, so you go ahead, and if it's still a question, I'll bring it back up.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to say I had the privilege of attending one of your graduations just a few weeks ago, and it was great to meet several of you for the first time and see a few of you. And I think one thing I think we've reflected on as we've been in this dialogue has been that, of course, all of us in this work want that to be the focus. Our kids, the students, them reaching that milestone, moving them toward that milestone. And it was inspiring to see the work you all had done. I think we all also agree that in order to get there, we need to be absolutely sure and clear that we're buttoned up as regards these questions of financial controls and preventing fraud. I mean, it's funny, we think about like how we think about charters. Those are the two questions we ask, right? Like the financial questions and then the performance question. And so thank you. I just want to say, for the record, I believe that, you know, for you all, you've met those conditions. Just I've not been as close to it as other board members, but hearing the story, reading, understanding, and thinking that we sort of met the condition where the right response is this FCAP, this accountability plan, and not something else. And I think that's all down to the leadership you all have displayed over the course of this. You know, again, I've heard this secondhand, but I do want to thank you all for your leadership. I think it's important to state for the record that like when these sorts of things happen, it doesn't always end up in a place like this. It could have been a very different conversation with us kind of like, I think, acting in our role as regulator and having to make some really, really difficult decisions. So thank you all for the way that you've kind of responded and shown up in all of this. And then I think commensurately, thank you to the members of the finance committee here at PCSB, who I know spent a lot of time in dialogue with you and with the staff to kind of to get to this resolution, to this conclusion. I think, you know, I think my broader reflection as you talk about lessons learned is it just made me think I'd like to see us asking ourselves what policies we need sector-wide that reduce the risk of fraud. And I think one dynamic of the conversation that I've heard is this question of, you know, you're a particularly large LEA within the district, right? What would have happened if this had happened to a smaller LEA with fewer financial resources? Recognize that maybe, as I think Jim said and others said, maybe this particular scale of fraud would have been less likely, but nonetheless, I think fraud would have affected a smaller LEA, you know, much more disproportionately than perhaps it affected you. So I guess, you know, two questions, and you can answer them in whatever order you like. One is advice for other charter leaders in the sector. What should they be doing now in order to minimize the risk of something like this happening to them? And then secondly, advice for the PCSB in, you know, we can't make any policy we want, but with the policy we can make, what we should be thinking about that would minimize this risk sector-wide with that kind of large and small LEA question in view as well.
I'm happy to respond to this. With respect to your first question, we had many policies, safeguards, and preemptive, as well as backwards-looking checks in place prior to the fraud. That said, we believe that there were 4 areas that offered an opportunity for additional policy training and execution improvements coming out of this fraud. That I would say that for other LEAs who may be listening, this would be areas you may want to look into or double check on. So those include vendor verification, vendor selection, as well as procurement selection criteria, confirmation of receipt of goods, and asset management and the tracking systems associated with it. With respect to the second question around how PCSB can play a role here, I do think that the overall control environment of an organization looks very different depending on its size, scale, and internal objectives. That being said, I think that there's a real opportunity for the Public Charter School Board to demonstrate what best practices may be with respect to certain internal controls and offer opportunities for collaboration amongst LEAs who are making this an initiative, whether it be now or in the future, to prevent this happening anywhere else across the sector.
Great, thank you.
Justin, I appreciate your saying that because I wouldn't want the learning here to be limited to KIPP. I like your suggestion of developing best practices and sharing information across the sector. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Yes, I have been throughout this, I've been thinking a lot about the sector-wide implications, the fact that, as we mentioned earlier, we had a number of 25-year reviews this year. We're looking forward to 30-year reviews in years to come. So the charter school sector in Washington, D.C. has been around now for more than 25 years, really about a generation. And as this sector continues to mature, we need to review and revisit our policies and practices to make sure our systems are appropriately, correspondingly maturing and improving. We can't anticipate worst case scenarios of pandemic showing up around the corner. So we need to have systems that can anticipate the worst. So this incident really underscores the need to learn and evaluate how our practices are working continuously. And again, it's worth restating again how much we appreciate KIPP coming forward in a timely manner and what the LEA is doing to ensure that these instances do not happen again. At this point, colleagues, I would like to entertain a motion.
I move to approve the financial corrective action plan for KIPP DC Public Charter School recommended by PCSB staff.
Second.
Thank you. We'll call vote.
Yep. Board Member Nick Rodriguez.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Jim Sandman.
Aye.
Chair Leah Cruzy.
Aye.
Board Member Ricardo Ganjum.
I have a proxy. Aye.
Board Member Chantel Wright is absent, and I am an aye.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, KIPP DC team.
Thank you for your continued support. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda is a charter amendment from Washington U Ying Public Charter School. For that, I yield the floor to Hannah Cousineau, Senior Manager of Sector Planning and Compliance. I would also like to invite representatives from the school to provide remarks regarding the amendment request. Carly Fischerow, Melissa Volpe, and John Blair.
Hi, I am going to be standing in for Hannah Cousineau, who led our evaluation of Washington U Ying Public Charter School's request. DC PCSB staff recommends that its board approve the request from Washington U Ying Public Charter School to amend its charter agreement and approve Board Chair Leah Cruzy to sign the school's charter renewal agreement, incorporating any approved amendments on the board's behalf. Beginning in school year 24-25, the school seeks to increase its enrollment ceiling by 337 students over time, reaching maximum capacity in school year 30-31. The school also seeks approval to operate a second facility at 4301 Harewood Road Northeast in Ward 5. DC PCSB staff concludes that the school's proposal is compelling and meets the standards for approval for expansion and facility requests. At the public hearing, the board raised questions on 4 topics: the size of the enrollment ceiling increase, the impact of the expansion on the school's transfer preference into DC International School, the academic performance of Washington U Ying's at-risk students, and enrollment trends among at-risk students. The school's leaders successfully responded to these questions during the public hearing. For example, Carly Fischerow, the executive director, explained that the 337 student increase is based off of the school's historic re-enrollment rate of 95% in grades pre-K 3 through 4. By adding more sections in grades pre-K 3 through kindergarten, while maintaining low student to teacher ratios, the school believes it can build a strong foundation of Mandarin fluency for its students, decreasing the number of interventions required in upper grades. If the board has further questions, representatives from the school can join us as panelists. And I see that they already have, excuse me.
Welcome, Yu Ying team. We had a thorough conversation last time and you gave us a great presentation. Is there anything on which you would like to update us from our last meeting?
Thank you so much. And we're excited to be back this evening. I think we're happy to answer any questions. We were just here a month ago, so we have a few updates, but mostly we have just been continuing on the work and closing out the year strong. But before we open it up to questions from you all, we want to take a moment to congratulate Friendship Public Charter School. We were cheering from the side, watching along with you. And as I can't remember which board member said it, but maybe it was you, Chairman Cruzy, but we're standing on big shoulders. And I think we all have a tremendous amount of respect for Pat and her team and the great work that they've done. So that's not really our update, but I just did want to take a minute to share that we are big fans off to the side. So happy to answer any questions.
I think one question I'd love to flag from the last conversation, we had a really great back and forth, thanks to board member Shakura Adamathanian, and I think especially you, Ms. Volpe, on some surveying you were doing with families and wanted to know if there's updates on that.
I'll pass this one to Carly. She's been heading this up with our family liaison team.
Great. Thank you so much. So I do want to share that I think one important milestone here is that we have hired a full-time family liaison. And this full-time family liaison is one of our parents who's had really a tremendous story. And not only is she a parent, but she also was a substitute teacher for us this year. So she brings both the parent background, but also the education background. And she's hit the ground running. And her first order of business was reaching out to all of the families who joined us this year through our equitable access preference, and has set up individual conversations with them to just check in on their first year and also understand what their most immediate needs are, which have really centered honestly around summer and summer camp and summer planning and thinking about how we can help them there. And then she's planning to broaden out those conversations to the new families who have enrolled through the equitable access preference, extending outreach and building trust with them. So we are planning, that's really our first introduction to her through the community. And then we are planning to send out a community-wide family survey at the end of July and keep it open through the start of the school year, and then be able to disaggregate that data by family type and need. And so we appreciated both the questions and then Melissa Volpe's push here, and we're combining both a quantitative survey with also individual outreach from our new liaison. And our current liaison, who is Miss Autumn Jackson, is also here, and she is managing and onboarding her to the work.
I wasn't sure if Shakura, you look like you might have had a question right there.
I do. Sorry, I have a 3-year-old back here wanting to say. Okay. Anyway, building upon the question that Chairman Cruzy asked, I would kind of revisiting the conversation or the dialogue that we had, would love to hear if there are any updates around like specifics around the integration plan with regard to your at-risk families. Like what will that look like?
Yeah, thank you. It's a super good question. So I think, again, the big push that we have is around building relationships and getting to know our families and customizing our program for their needs. But one of the more systemic actions we've taken is we've created a full-scale family engagement plan. It has a number of strategies that start with interactions between our staff and our at-risk families in the enrollment process, and then continue all the way through their journey here. And one of the newer and updated initiatives is around our new family orientation work that we started with in terms of school visits this late spring and summer. And then we're doing a full-scale new family orientation in July that also includes play dates and meetups, and then mentorships with other families. So that's some of the initial adjustments that we've made. And then again, we're really trying to systematize our family engagement approach.
And what of training and support for staff members? What will that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're partnering with Kindred, I think, as we shared last time. And Kindred is helping us really think about our proposal, the work that we're doing, both with our staff, and then how we bring forward the work that we did really around caregivers a couple of years ago, and introduce that to our new families. But for us, it's really focused on how do we make sure that families and staff have open, positive, and authentic lines of communication. So that's really for us the primary focus of our training for our staff this summer, and then making sure that the systems that we have in place to communicate with families really do meet their needs. So our previous family engagement liaison, Autumn Jackson, gave regular surveys to our families around their preference for communication. And that's been helpful in terms of the technical, but we really want to make sure, and that was for communication with her. And we really want to expand that line of questioning in our family survey to make sure that all of our staff know what preference our families have in terms of how they want to be communicated with, and that we're customizing the way we communicate with families to meet their needs. So not everyone loves email, right? Some people prefer text. Not everybody finds our Seesaw and our Manage Back and our Toddle apps that accessible, right? There's many of them. And so really making sure that that data is shared with our staff, and that staff feel like that they can use a variety of modalities to authentically connect and communicate with families. So we'll be doing a lot of training this summer and in the early fall around how to communicate in authentic and trust and positive manners.
Thank you.
Last month, we also discussed looking farther down the field and the potential impact expansion could have on the feeder pattern or feeder relationship into DCI. Do you know, and in the communications that you're continuing to evolve with families, have an idea of, does everyone want to go there to matriculate onto DCI and continue their Mandarin immersion experience? Has that factored into, when I reflect on last month's conversation, does that factor into some of your expansion plans and how to manage expectations?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'm hoping that members of my team may be able to pull the most recent data, but right now we're finding that that not everybody in 5th grade chooses DCI. A number of families choose other middle schools, some in the DCPS system, some in the charter system, and then a number of our families actually make a choice in 4th grade. So at the end of their 4th grade year, in lieu of their 5th grade year at Yu Ying, to choose a school that starts its middle school program in 5th grade. Basis and Latin are strong middle school feeders for the Yu Ying community. And this year, I think we have 16% of our 4th grade, our rising 5th grade class, who are planning to matriculate to a different middle school starting in 5th grade. For the majority of them, that's Basis or Latin. A few have chosen a private school. But for the majority, it's the opportunity to go to Basis or Latin, which do offer, well, at least Latin offers a Mandarin course, but not Mandarin immersion. And there's a variety of reasons why families choose either Basis or Latin. Primarily, they're excellent schools, but also they have siblings there, or they've had like really positive experiences, and we're supportive of a choice landscape. We want our kids to be able to choose whichever opportunity makes the most sense for them. Although we really like to keep them for their 5th grade year. So our model, though, is really built on, again, those years of data. We looked at the most recent years, and we saw that we were losing about somewhere between 17 and 13% of our 5th grade, rising 5th graders before they get to 5th grade. And so that's why our model is adjusted to be built on, excuse me for my voice, 95% re-enrollment rates in pre-K 3 through 4th grade, and then 85% re-enrollment rate at 5th grade, because of those really great choice options that start for middle schoolers in 5th grade. Again, at this point, we're not overly concerned that the students who want DCI will not have that as an option when we hit our max enrollment in 2030-31, because we continue to see really exciting growth plans, again, for a variety of middle schools, including Latin as well. But it's something we're very mindful of, and we have been in constant conversation with Mike Roscom, as well as some of the other charter feeder schools, to make sure that we're being really intentional about how we can plan for that situation many years before it becomes an issue. And so we are in active conversations with Mike and the team now.
That's helpful. And
obviously with Peter, talk to Peter all the time.
And forgive me for so many questions here, but I'm just looking back on the robust conversation we had last month and wondering if there have been similar kind of updates. So the last question I'll ask tonight is, do you have updates on enrollment and the at-risk preference from this current round, understanding the lottery continues to move over the next couple of months?
Melissa, do you want to start? Okay, so I'll pull the most recent data that we had right when the lottery closed, which I think, it is a constantly moving target, but we're excited to say that of the students who enrolled through the equitable access preference for the 22-23 school year, we had 20 students in our pre-K 3 class, and 19 of those 20 have re-enrolled for next year. So our re-enrollment rate for the pre-K 3 class has been really promising and very exciting for us, and that matters a lot. In terms of of our current year, we've filled all of our EA preference seats in pre-K 3. We set aside 25%, and all of those have been filled to date. And then in the grades where we had more kind of moving targets and openings, because we didn't have any known openings when the lottery started when the lottery closed in March, in pre-K 4 and in kindergarten and 1st grade, we are setting aside 25% of those open seats for equitable access preference families, and have made our commitment and are sticking to filling those. And we're on target to make that 100% commitment as well. Melissa, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, you did good.
Thanks.
I don't have any questions, but I would just like to explain why I am going to vote to approve the amendment and to increase your enrollment ceiling. Our board scrutinizes applications for new charters and requests to increase enrollment ceilings very carefully. We are acutely aware of the vacant seats across some schools in the District of Columbia. Notwithstanding that, I don't have any problem approving your request here. I think you're a unique school. I think you have made an unusually compelling showing of demand for your seats. Your seats are not fungible with those vacant seats in other schools. These to me are unique seats. Yu Ying is not like other schools. I think you are a demonstration of the value of choice and of people voting for what you offer by enrolling their students with you. So I think this is a strong case and I thought your responses to the many questions that were raised last month at our hearing then were directly responsive to at least the concerns that I had. I appreciate the thoroughness of your presentations.
Go
Thank
ahead.
you so much. We really appreciate that. Thank you.
I also don't have any questions, and I missed the robust discussion of a month ago, so I just caught up. And I think the main questions have been asked. I just want to echo what Jim said, which is just that I think it is an environment in which we need to be really careful about when and how we add seats or increase enrollment ceilings. It feels like the standard needs to be high, but at the same time, when the standard is met, we need to celebrate that and be unequivocal in our support for expanding a high quality option in this city. And I look at the numbers, right, and the level of performance, and it is just a remarkable achievement. And, it's funny, the one asterisk, which we know about looking at the data, right, there's a wobble in the data here for at-risk students, but it is notable that for most student groups, Black, Hispanic, Latino, special education, English learners, that you all are performing above the state average. And all of this alongside a commitment to diversify further and to grow in diversity, even as you maintain and grow in quality. And so those are the reasons why I feel comfortable supporting this proposal. And just congratulations to all of you on what you've achieved.
Thank you so much.
I promise you we will segue to an actual vote in a moment, but want to echo the sentiments of both Jim and Nick's comments, and also want to share when I went through my first round of charter applications a few years ago, I remember hearing from staff about when Yu Ying's application had come before the board years before that, and how there had been skepticism of how could a program like this work. There would not be demand for it, or I'm not quoting anyone in particular, and I'm sure I'm misquoting, but the point is that the context in which this was offered was, but look, this is what parents in fact want, and the results thus far appear so promising. So I agree very, very much with Jim's point around we have to be ever more careful about approving new seats when we have so many vacant seats right now in the district that have been authorized. And we have to be mindful about population changes throughout the districts, because we want to make sure that schools we authorize are set up for success and service to the students that they serve. And it's with that very serious and sober look that I still nonetheless will be voting in favor of this. And I really appreciate the thoroughness of the response to the questions that we had last month and our ability to follow up on it this month. If no further comments, then colleagues, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the charter amendment of Washington Yu Ying Public Charter School.
Second.
I'll begin with the roll call. Board Member Nick Rodriguez.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Jim Salmon.
Aye.
Chair Leah Cruzy.
Aye.
Board Member Ricardo Ganjum.
I have a proxy that says aye.
Board Member Chantel Wright is absent, and I am an aye.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you all so much. And I want to just again thank the staff at PCSB for their tremendous help in figuring out how to do this joint application, especially as I transitioned into a new role. And I want to thank the amazing Yu Ying staff, those who you can see here, Melissa Volpe, who you've gotten a chance to get to know, who is my far better partner in crime, and those who you can't see on the screen, Amy Quinn, and our board chair, Lamar White. And then most importantly, all of those Yu Ying founders, including Makita Alexander. Really, she is, again, when we talk about standing on shoulders, it is through their work that we've been able to get here. So I feel very honored to be able to carry it forward. So thank you.
Tired shoulders tonight. Thank you. All right, next I yield the floor to Holly Tursich, Senior Policy Specialist from the Data and Accountability Team, to introduce the next agenda item, which is the temporary extension of the COVID-19 impact policy.
Hi, everyone. I am Holly Torsage, and I am a senior specialist in the School Performance Department. DCPCSB staff recommends its board vote to temporarily extend the COVID-19 impact policy, which articulates changes in the implementation of policies and practices impacted by the pandemic, including ways for determining charter goal attainment. The COVID-19 impact policy expires on June 30th, 2023. DCPCSB staff proposes extending the policy through August 31st, 2023. This extension gives DCPCSB staff time to continue developing the proposed charter goals policy. The charter goals policy is designed to reaffirm and establish new means for determining charter goal attainment for school year 2023-24. DCPCSB staff held a public hearing on the charter goals policy on May 15, 2023, and expects to ask its board to vote to approve the charter goals policy during the July 17, 2023 public meeting. Temporarily extending the COVID-19 impact policy will allow it to remain in effect until the board approves the charter goals policy. I'm happy to answer any questions about this request.
Holly, thank you for this. Can you explain the same thing again in terms that for anyone else who's listening and says, I thought it's over, why are we doing this?
Yes, absolutely. So the COVID-19 impact policy, as I said, is set to expire on June 30th. The board opened the charter goals policy for public comment on April 24th and held a public hearing on May 15th. We received extensive, thoughtful public comment on the charter goals policy. And in order to articulate intentional responses to the public comment that we received, staff decided to extend the vote to July 17th. To avoid a gap in guidance, we are recommending the board extend the COVID-19 impact policy through August 31st. The charter goals policy will supersede the COVID-19 impact policy once it is approved. However, staff recommend that the board extend the COVID-19 impact policy through August in the event staff needs additional time to adjust the policy.
Let me just try to recap and please tell me where I'm off. These policies articulate how it's basically describing what data and how data are submitted to the PCSB as the authorizer for comparison against charter goals to make sure that schools have reached their goals. Is that right?
That is correct. And it is specific to data that we have received during the pandemic and in light of data availability or lack thereof.
So it's about availability and lack thereof. And the reason why we're going to end one and continue another has nothing to do with the actual pandemic going forward. It's just how we're kind of classifying what we're expecting to receive. Is that right?
That is correct.
So this is very technical?
Yes.
Okay. How does the extension of this policy factor into our kind of strategic roadmap and the revised accountability framework that this body's been working on for some time?
So the COVID-19 impact policy outlines goal attainment options through school year 2022-23. The charter goals policy will outline goal attainment options through school year 2023-24. The first school quality report or its equivalent for the revised accountability framework will be published in the fall of 2024. It's important to note that staff expects to amend the charter goals policy to outline goal attainment options for school year 2024 and beyond, school year 2024-25 and beyond. Additionally, this amended version of the policy will condense and centralize goals guidance across existing policies, such as elect the PMF as charter goals policy and the charter amendments for revised goals and academic achievement expectations policy. DCPCSB will engage schools on this policy in the coming months, including what they can expect to be included moving forward.
Just one other thing to clarify, like why we need to do this, which is simply if we didn't approve this and we had this 2-month gap of no policy in place, what would be the impact or the consequences?
That's a great question. So we still expect to put the charter goals policy in effect for a vote for July 17th. So there would really only be 1 month lapse in guidance. A lot of this, although it would not have necessarily an immediate impact, as we just finished our reviews with the friendship review, it's important for schools to have the opportunity for guidance to be in existence as they're planning their upcoming school year. The charter goals policy, although it is separate from the COVID-19 impact policy, is expanding on the goal attainment options for this upcoming school year. So we want to ensure that school leaders have information available to plan accordingly for the upcoming school year.
Yeah. It also says for those who, for any reason, have to submit data in the next month or 2 or whatever, that they can know that that is backed by a policy of the PCSB and that they're compliant with it until the new policy takes its place.
Yes, absolutely. That's correct.
Great.
Okay, colleagues, I'll now entertain a motion.
I move to approve the temporary extension of the COVID-19 impact policy.
A second. Roll call vote. Board Member Nick Rodriguez.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Jim Sandman.
Aye.
Chairwoman Leah Cruzy.
Aye.
Board Member Ricardo Ganjum.
She is an aye in her proxy.
Board Member Chantel Wright is absent, and I am an aye.
Okay, thank you. And as Holly's already in place, I'd like to invite her to introduce the next agenda item, which are revisions to the data and document submission policy.
Yes, thank you, Chair Cruzy. DCPCSB staff recommends that its board vote to approve revisions to the data and document submission and verification policy. The policy establishes data and document submission standards for public charter schools. Staff proposes updating the policy to better align with newer policies and practices. These edits will have minimal impact on schools. This policy was opened for public comment from March 20th through May 29th. We held a public hearing on the policy on April 24th. Staff received extensive and thoughtful feedback on this policy from 4 individuals, suggesting language adjustments and identifying opportunities for clarity. We've since adjusted the policy in response to their feedback, and I am happy to answer any questions about this request.
If we have no questions, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the revisions to the existing data and document submission and verification policy.
Second.
I'll take a roll call vote. Board Member Nick Rodriguez.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Jim Sandman. Vice Chairman Jim Sandman.
Aye.
Okay, very good. Chairwoman Leah Cruzy.
Aye.
Board Member Ricardo Ganjum.
Aye.
And Board Member Chantel Wright is absent, and I am an aye.
Okay, thank you. Next, we will vote on the consent calendar. Would any board member like to remove an item from the calendar for further discussion or state a recusal for the record?
Board member, Chair Cruzy, while I'm not stating a recusal, I am abstaining from the vote for achievement prep as I wasn't present for the discussion there.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you. Then I will decouple these. Why don't I entertain a motion for the consent calendar for the charter renewal agreements for Center City and Washington U Ying that will include you. We'll hold a separate vote on the consent calendar that will not include you. So this first motion, I will entertain a motion for the consent calendar for the charter renewal agreement for for Center City Public Charter School and Washington U Yang Public Charter School.
So moved.
Second.
And you can do the roll call vote for this one then.
Board Member Nick Rodriguez,
Aye.
Vice Chairman Jim Sandman,
Aye.
Chairwoman Leah Cruzy,
Aye.
Board Member Ricardo Ganjum,
Proxy is an aye.
Board Member Chantel Wright is absent, and I am an aye.
And I will entertain a motion for the consent calendar for the charter renewal agreement for Achievement Preparatory Public Charter School.
So moved.
Second.
So then I'll take a roll call vote of Nick Rodriguez,
Aye.
Jim Sandman,
Aye.
aye. Leah Cruzy, Chair am I. Ricardo Ganjum is an aye. Shakora Adamathanian,
I'm abstaining.
thank you very much. Oh, forgive me. Now we are going to do a consent calendar that includes the balance of the consent calendar items, which includes the alternative accountability framework status of Children's Guild, Goodwill Excel, Kingsman, Monument Academy, St. Coletta. It includes the charter amendment for basis graduation requirements. It includes opening for public comment, the special education audit and monitoring policy, and reading into record the fiscal year 2023 approved auditors list and audit guidelines.
I will now take a.
I will entertain a motion to approve the remaining.
Sorry.
So moved.
Second.
All right, I will now take a roll call vote. Board Member Nick Rodriguez,
Aye.
Vice Chairman Jim Sandman,
Aye.
Chairwoman Leah Cruzy,
Aye.
Board Member Ricardo Ganjum,
Is an aye in her proxy.
Board Member Chantel Wright is absent, and I am an aye.
Is there any new business? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Should I do a roll call vote? Okay, excellent. Board Member Nick Rodriguez. I'm sorry. Board
Aye.
Member Nick Rodriguez,
Aye.
Vice Chairman Jim Sandman,
Aye.
Chairwoman Leah Crizzy, Board Member Ricardo Ganjum,
Not needed.
Board Member Chantel Wright is absent, and I am an aye.
Good night. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
night,
everyone.
thank you.
Have a good night.